All right. I believe we are ready to go. Doing the checks, sound checks. 1 2 1 2. Hello. I should probably turn off the music. There's a 30-second delay with the YouTube, so I gotta remember. Am I too loud? I think I'm too loud. Hello. 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 Am I too loud? 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 15 16 17. Oh, I should probably also get rid of. There we go. Hello, hi, and hello. Dirty always says that I'm too low, so I think that whatever I think is right, I'm gonna go like a little bit higher than that, right? Probably around there, right? Hello. Hi. Okay, we're waiting for that delay. Meow 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 meow. Deem 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 da dum 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 meow 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 la da 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 la da dum dum. That's what we got to do the checks. Yeah, okay. Seems like the text to screen is doing all right. Do 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 num 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 da 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 dum dum da. Hello. Liberty for you and for me. Today we are doing Destination Void by Frank Herbert. Beginning of the Pandora sequence. Very, very interesting book. In my opinion, I really like it. Let's do a brief synopsis, overview. Destination Void is a science fiction novel by the American author Frank Herbert, the first of 4 novels in the Pandora sequence series. It first appeared in Galaxy magazine, illustrated by John Galunta in August 1965 under the title Do I Wake or Dream? But was published in book form as Destination Void the following year. Revised edition, edited and updated by the author, was released in 1978. The book stands alone, but the story is continued and embellished with more details of the Moonbase project and the history of the clone. That's forget. There were other novels: Jesus Incident, and Lazarus Effects, The Ascension Factor, co-authored by Bill Ransom. In the future, mankind has tried to develop artificial intelligence, succeeding only. No. Okay, it's a short book. We'll get right into it. Ignore spoilers. You probably didn't even hear them anyway. Moving on. I think we should just read the freaking book then. But Frank Herbert, author of Dune, you may know, but he wrote a lot of other interesting books as well. Uh, 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 uh. Some of the ones that I like. So there's the Pandora sequence. We got Destination Void, A Jesus Incident, Lazarus Effect, Ascension Factor. Consentiency series is pretty cool. Jordy McKee, I think was the name. Where take place in. Who's the one that I'm thinking of? I don't think this is the one. The Saudi experiment, yeah. And George X. McKee is a saboteur extraordinaire. Dosadi experiment. He's also in The Whipping Star and The Tactful Saboteur. I don't think I've read A Matter of Traces. Obviously, you got Dune, through Chapter House Dune, and then wait, no, that one was written by his. Yeah, Chapter House was written by Frank Herbert. Standalone novels include The Dragon in the Sea, The Green Brain, The Eyes of Heisenberg, The Heaven Makers. Heaven Makers was pretty good. I think I read that one. Set on a contemporary Earth with one difference that we are being watched and manipulated by aliens for their viewing pleasure. I'm pretty sure I read the Heaven Makers. I can't really. Oh no, it was the God Makers. That's the one. I remember this one. Yeah. Story focuses on Lewis Orn, an agent for a government agency which develops lost planets. After correctly identifying a warlike civilization on the planet Hamel, he is drafted in to investigate adjustment, which manages dangerous planets under auspices of IA. He travels to various planets in order to maintain peace throughout the galaxy. I don't remember this one very well, but I do know that I read that one. Soul Catcher, Hellstrom's Hive. There's a good amount of these that I have not read. But the ones that I have read, I really enjoy. This is one of them. I don't have a physical copy, so we're going PDF form for this one. Which is fine with me. It's fine. We'll deal with it. It's okay. It's okay. Um, okay, here we are. First winner of the Science Fiction Writers of America Novel Award. It's pretty short. It's like 100, almost 200 pages, I think it is. We should be able to knock this one out today. If not, it'll be like a 10-minute stream next time or something to finish it, right? Destination Void by Frank Herbert. Space Sleep. Aboard the Earthling, they were a hand-picked lot, the 3,006 survivors of the toughest weeding out process the project directors could devise for the doppelgangers' charges. The final six had been the choicest of the choice, the umbilicus crew to monitor the ship until it left the solar system, then tie off the few manual controls and turn the 200-year crossing to Tau Ceti over to that one lowly consciousness, an organic mental core. And while the 3006 lay dormant behind the hive tanks, water shields in the heart of the ship, their lives were to remain subject to the servos and sensors surgically linked to the organic mental core. But now we're 3003, Timberlake thought with a sense of grief, of shame and defeat, and our last organic mental core is finished. 3 already dead, and the organic mental core useless. Unless they did something and fast, the project was doomed, and one by one, each of them would perish. Destination Void by Frank Herbert, a Berkeley Medallion book published by Berkeley Publishing Corporation. Blah blah, a bunch of blank pages. What the heck? What's going on here? Am I supposed to wait for these to load? Yeah, probably. Do 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 num 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 num. There we go. Copyright 1966 by Frank Herbert. Published by arrangement with the author's agent, a different version of this novel appeared in Galaxy under the title Do I Sleep or Wake? That's right, we just read about that, remember? Um, should we? Maybe I can. Who cares? I'm thinking maybe there's like a different version we might be able to find, but let's just finish this one. It's fine. We can always read other versions other times if it's short enough. Sailor, take care. Sailor, take care. Danger is near thee. Beware, 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 beware. Many brave hearts are sleeping. Many brave hearts are asleep in the deep. So beware, beware. From Asleep in the Deep by Arthur J. Lamb and H.W. Petrie. When Shall I Awake by Frank Herbert. Actually, yeah. This is the original version. Maybe we do that one, Internet Archive. Why didn't I just go to this one first? This one's published in 1970. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the one. That's the one we want. Oh no, it's the same one. It's the same exact one. Oh, it's this limited preview. Now I did used to have a copy of it, but I don't know where the heck it went. I haven't got a new copy yet, so we shall deal with it. I guess we just go back to the one that we were using. They're all look like the same one. Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh no, I think this is the one that we want. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Here we go. Here we go. Here we are. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course. Dum 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 dum. All right, Internet Archive. We are using you. Of course, dude. All right, Internet Archive. We are using. So I'm just reading the screen. I love the way that it text to speeches me. Dum da 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 dum dum da dum da da dum da da dum da da dum dee dim 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 da da dum dee 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 dim dee 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 dim meow 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 meow. Da 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 dum 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 da dum da da dum dee 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 dee. Now this one is substantially longer, 292, but that just might be because it's a different type font. Also because it has more stuff to talk about for Frank Herbert. Berkeley Books by Frank Herbert. Destination Void, The Dosadi Experiment, The Eyes of Heisenberg, The God Makers, Santaroga Barrier, Whipping Star, The Worlds of Frank Herbert, the Dune trilogy. So there's at this point the three books for the of Dune that have been released are Dune and the Illustrated Dune, Dune Messiah, and Children of Dune. Destination Void. Relays clicked as Prudence shunted the ATT to Com Central. Presently, she said, "It's short and sweet. Hempstead tells us to cease ignoring communications. We are ordered to turn back." Odd choice of words. "This is an arbitrary turnback command." The sound of Prudence's voice, flattery went cold. They know, he thought. They know we have created a rogue consciousness. Arbitrary turnback was the coded order he had both dreaded and longed for. It was the kill ship command. So what's happening? All right, so that's like a little like sampler of what's happening in the book soon. Destination Void, Frank Herbert. This is the revised edition. Hell yeah. All right, yeah, yeah, yeah. This is the one we want. So let's see, 1978. Perfect. I saw the pale student of an all I saw the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. I saw the hideous phantasm of a man stretched out, and then on the working of some powerful engine, show signs of life and stir with an uneasy, half vital motion. Frightful must it be, for supremely frightful would be the effect of any human endeavor to mock the stupendous mechanism of the Creator. Mary Shelley on the creation of Frankenstein. Why are we talking about Frankenstein? What could this possibly have to relate to the Frankenstein about? Polo Google. Wait, Polo Google. I changed it to Google. Polo Gue. Oh, I'm sorry. We're supposed to be reading here, and I'm over here making stupid sound. All right, prologue. It was the fifth clone ship to out from the moonbase on Project Consciousness, and he leaned forward to watch it carefully as his duty demanded. The view showed it passing the Pluto orbit, and he knew by this time the crew had encountered the usual programmed frustrations, even some deaths and serious injuries. But that was the pattern. Earthling, it was called. Earthling number 5. The ship was a giant egg, one half of it a dark shadow lambent on a starry background, the other half reflecting silver from the distant sun. A nervous cough sounded from the darkness behind him, and he suppressed a sympathetic repetition of that sound. Others were not as self controlled. By the time the coughing spasms had subsided, the Earthling had begun to make its turn. The movement was impossible, but there was no denying what they all saw. The ship turned through 180 degrees and reversed, heading directly back down its outward track. Any clue at all on how they did that? He asked. No, sir, nothing. I want you to go through the message capsule again, he said. We're missing something. Yes, sir. It was a sigh of recognition. Someone else spoke from the darkness. Get ready for the capsule launching. Yes, they'd all seen this enough to anticipate the sequence. The capsule was a silver needle that looped from the Earthling's stern. It held to the ship's blind spot. Who knew what weapons such a ship might produce? until it was lost amongst the stars. From beneath their view, a flame darted, the laser relay with its destruct message. A purple glow touched the ship's bulbous nose. It held for no more than 3 heartbeats before the ship exploded into a blinding orange blossom. That flattery model is sure as hell reliable, someone said. Nervous laughter went around the room, but he ignored it, concentrating on the viewer. Why the hell did they always think it was the flattery model? It could be anyone on the crew. Their view closed on the swollen blossom with the collapsing speed of time lapse, which made the explosion's orange light wink out too rapidly. Presently, the movement slowed and their view moved into the spreading wreckage, probing with crystalline flares of light until it found what it sought. The recording box. That and the message capsule were the most important elements remaining from this failure. Failure number 5, chat. Claw retractors could be seen grabbing the recording box and pulling it back beneath their view. The crystalline light continued to probe. Anything they saw here could be valuable, but the light picked out nothing but twisted metal, torn shreds of plastic, and here and there limbs and other parts of the crew. There was one particularly brutal glimpse of a head with a part of a shoulder and an arm that ended just below the elbow. Bloody frost globules had formed around the head, but they still recognized it. Tim, someone said. A woman's voice far to the rear of the room could be heard repeating, shit, 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 until someone silenced her. The view blanked out, and he leaned back. Hold on. I did okay, so I guess we have to actually like check this book out. Interesting. Sorry, this is my first time using. It should be this simple though. Yeah. Perfect. There we go. Thank you. Okay, nice. Yeah. All we had to do was click. That's so funny though. No. I was gonna. Yeah, I wanted to see what the button did. Return now, but I didn't want to return it now. I wonder like if there's like a cooldown period when you have to like we have to wait a day or two before we check it out again, which is really weird, which would be really, really strange, which is why it'd be funny. The view blanked out and he leaned forward, feeling the ache between his shoulders. He knew he would have to identify that woman and have her transferred. No mistaking the near hysteria in her voice. Some harsh catharsis was indicated. He shut down the Holopack's controls, flicked the switch for the room lights, then stood and turned in the blinking brilliance. They're clones, he said, keeping his voice cold. They're not human. They're clones, as is indicated by their uniform middle name of Lon. They are property. Anybody who forgets that is going off Moonbase in the next shuttle. That sign on my door says Morgan Hempstead, Director. There will be no more emotional outbursts in this room as long as I am Director. So, I mean, I didn't want to like spoil that for you, chat, when I was reading the synopsis on Wikipedia. But they're clones, so we know all that, and one of them might know that, but they're for the most part they're oblivious. Let's learn more. Um, 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 um. It's a revised edition longer. The other one was like 180 pages. It's like 200. All right, we might not finish this today, depending. So let's just do our best. See. Chapter 1. We call it Project Consciousness, and our basic tools are the carefully selected clones, our doppelgangers. The motivator is frustration. Thus, we design into our systems false goals and things which will go wrong. That's why we chose Tau Ceti as the target. There is no livable planet at Tau Ceti. Morgan Hempstead, lectures at Moonbase. It's dead, Bickles said. He held up the severed end of the feeder tube, stared at the panel from which he had cut it. His heart was beating too fast, and he could feel his hands trembling. Fluorescent red letters 8 centimeters high spelled out a warning on the panel in front of him. The warning seemed a mockery after what he had just done. Organic mental core to be removed only by life systems engineer. Bickle felt an extra sense of quiet in the ship. Something, not someone, he thought, was gone. It was as though the molecular stillness of the outer space had invaded the Earthling's concentric halls and spread through to the heart of this egg-shaped chunk of the metal hurtling towards Tau Ceti. So here we are on the ship with Bickle, the engineer. His two companions were wrapped in the silence. Were wrapped in this silence. Bickle saw they were afraid to break the quiet moment of shame and guilt and anger and relief. What else could we do? Bickle demanded. He held up the severed tube, glared at it. Rahalan flattery. Flattery? Rahalan flattery. Remember, Lon means that they're clones? Rahalan flattery in the flattery model? Rahalan flattery. Their psychiatrist, Chaplain, cleared his throat, said, Easy, John. We share the blame equally. Bickle turned his glare on flattery, noted the man's quizzical expression, and penetrating. Calculated and penetrating. The narrow, haughty face that somehow focused a sense of terrible superiority within remote brown eyes and upraked black eyebrows. You know what you can do with your blame, Bickle growled, but Flattery's words destroyed his anger, made him feel defeated. Bickle swung his attention to Timberlake. Gerald Lon Timberlake, Life Systems Engineer, the man who should have taken responsibility for this dirty business. I forget what Bickle is. It's he. Okay, we're gonna find out. We're gonna find out right now. I should just keep on reading. Why am I trying to remember things when we should just read the book? Timberlake, a quick and nervous scarecrow of a man with skin almost the color of his brown hair, stared at the metal deck near his feet, avoiding Bickle's eyes. Shame and fear. That's all Tim feels, Bickle thought. Timberlake's weakness, his inability to kill the OMC, even when organic mental core OMC, even when it meant saving the ship with its thousands of helpless lives, had almost killed them, and all the man could feel now was shame and fear. There'd been no doubt about what had to be done. The OMC had gone mad, a wild runaway consciousness. It had been a sick ball of gray matter whose muscles turned every servo on the ship into a murder weapon, who stared out at them with madness from every sensor, who raged gibberish at them from every vocoder. No, there had been no doubt, not with three of their number murdered, and the only wonder was that they had been allowed to destroy it. Perhaps it wanted to die, Bickle thought, and he wondered if that had been the fate of the 6 other project ships which had vanished into nothingness without a trace. Did their OMC run wild? Did their umbilicus crews fail when it was kill or be killed? A tear began sliding down Timberlake's left cheek. To Bickle, that was the final blow. Some of his anger returned. He faced Timberlake. What do we do now, Captain? Tuttle's irony was not lost on either of Bickle's companions. Flattery started to reply, thought better of it. If the starship Earthling could be said to have a captain, discounting an in-service organic mental core, then unspoken agreement to give that title to an umbilicus crew's life systems engineer. None of them, though, had ever used the word officially. At last, Timberlake met Bickle's stare, but all he said was, You know why I couldn't bring myself to do it. Bickle continued to study Timberlake. What shabby conceit had given them this excuse for a life systems engineer? Once the umbilicus crew had numbered 6, the 3 here plus ship nurse Maida Lon Blaine, tool specialist Oscar Lon Anderson, and biochemist Sam Lon Sheeler. Now Blaine, Anderson, and Sheeler were dead. Sheeler's exploded corpse jammed in an access tube on the aft perimeter. Anderson strangled by a rogue sphincter lock, and lovely Maida mangled by a runaway cargo. Bickle blamed most of the tragedy on Timberlake. The damn fool had only taken the ruthless but obvious step at the first sign of trouble. There had been plenty of warning, with the first two of the ship's 3 OMCs going catatonic. The seed of trouble had been obvious, and the symptoms? Exactly the same symptoms that had preceded the breakdown of the old artificial consciousness project back on Earth. Insane destruction of people and material. But Tim had refused to see it. Tim had blathered about the sanctity of all life. Life, ha, Bickle thought. There were all of them, even the colonists down in the hype tanks. Expendable biopsy material. Doppelgangers grown in notobiotics. Is that a word, or did Frank Herbert make that up? We're looking that up. Notobiotic. Pretty sure that's a word, right? Notobiotic. Notobiotic refers to organisms, particularly animals, that are raised and maintained under controlled, known microbial conditions. This means scientists can precisely define and control the microbial composition within these organisms, whether they are completely germ-free or populated with a specific set of organisms. Oh, so they're projects. They're born in a test tube. Science experiments. Doppelgangers grown in notobiotic sterility and the moon base. Ooh, moon base. We need a moon base, chat. That's what we need. That would help us. So yeah, people say like, oh, we got to get to Mars, but the first step is the moon. You need a launch spot. The moon, the best place to launch because you don't have to fight with Earth's orbit. You know, it's close to the Earth. I mean, it's still pretty far if you if you know how far things away are away in the solar system. Yeah, the moon is really not really that close to us, honestly. Close enough, but not really too close, honestly. And so yeah, we get onto the moon, and then we have a good spot to launch off into all of the stellar radiation. Yeah, then we got to deal with that, chat. Then there's a lot of radiation out there that's just not good for human life in any sort of way. A lot of problems we got to solve, chat. Um, Untouched by human hands. That had been their private joke. They had known their Earthborn teachers only as voices and doll sized images on cathode screens on the base intercom systems. And only occasionally through the triple glass at the locks that sealed off the sterile creche. They had emerged from the axolotl tanks to the padded metal claws of the nursemaids that were servo extensors of the moon base personnel, forever barred from intimate contact with those they served. Out of contact. That's the story of our lives, Bickle thought, and the thought softened his anger at Timberlake. Timberlake had begun to fidget under Bickle's stare. Flattery intervened. Well, we'd better do something, he said. He had to get them moving. Flattery knew. This that was part of his job. Keep them active, working, moving, even if they moved into open conflict. That could be solved when and if it happened. Raj is right, Timberlake thought. We have to do something. He took a deep breath, trying to shake off his sense of shame and failure, and the resentment of Bickle. Damn Bickle. Superior Bickle. Special Bickle, the man of countless talents. Bickle upon whom their lives depended. Timberlake glanced around the familiar command central room in the ship's core, a space 27 meters long and 12 meters on the short axis. Like the ship, Com Central was vaguely egg-shaped. Four cocoon-like action couches with almost identical control boards lay roughly parallel in the curve of the room's wider end. Color-coded pipes and wires, dials and instrument controls, switch banks, and warning telltales spread patterned confusion against the gray metal walls. Here were the necessities for monitoring the ship and its autonomous consciousness. An organic mental core. Organic mental core, Timberlake thought, and he felt the full return of his feelings of guilt and grief. Not human brain, oh no, an organic mental core. Better yet, an OMC. The euphemism makes it easier to forget that the core was once a human brain and an infant monster doomed to die. We take only terminal cases, since that makes the mortality of the act less questionable. Now we've killed it. I'll tell you what I'm going to do, Bickle said. He looked at the accept and translate board auxiliary to the transmitter on his personal control console. I'm going to report back to Moonbase what's happened. He turned from the wrapped panel and dropped the severed feeder tube to the deck without looking at it. The tube drifted downward slowly in the ship's quarter gravity. We've no code for this. It's kind of emergency, Timberlake confronted Bickle, stared angrily at the man's square face, disliking every feature of it from the close-cropped blonde hair to the wide mouth and pugnacious jaw. I know, Bickle said, and he stepped around Timberlake. I'm sending it clear speech. Can't do that, Timberlake protested, turning to glare at Bickle's back. Every second's delay adds to the time lag, Bickle said. As it is, it has to go more than a fourth of the way across the solar system. He dropped into his couch, set the cocoon to half enclose him, swung the transmitter into position. You'll be blatting it to everyone on Earth, including you know who, Timberlake said, because he half agreed with Timberlake and wanted to gain time. Flattery moved to a position looking down on Bickle in the couch. What specifically are you going to tell them? I'm not about to mince words, Bickle retorted. He threw the transmitter warm-up switches, began checking the sequence tape. I'm going to tell them we had to unlock the last brain from the ship's controls and kill it in the process. They'll tell us to abort, Timberlake said. The merest hesitation of his hands on the tape punch keyboard told that Bickle had heard. And what'll you say happened to the brains? Flattery asked. They went nuts, Bickle said. I'm just going to report our casualties. That's not precisely what happened, Flattery said. Better not talk. We'd better talk this over, Timberlake said, and he felt the beginnings of desperation. Look, you, Bickle said, shifting his attention to Timberlake. You're supposed to be the crew captain on this chunk of tin, and here we are drifting without any hands on the controls at all. He turned his attention to the keyboard. You think you're qualified to tell me what to do? Timberlake went pale with anger. Bickle defeats me so easily, he thought, he muttered. The whole world will be listening. But he turned away to his own couch, jacked in the temporary controls they had rigged shortly after the first ship brain had begun acting up. Presently, he sank onto the couch, tested the computer circuits, and asked for course data. The organic mental cores did not go nuts, Flattery said. You can't. As far as we're concerned, they did. Bickle threw the master switch. A skin creeping hum filled the comm central as the laser amplifiers built up to full potential. I could stop him, Flattery thought as Bickle fed the voco tape into the transmitter. But we have to get the message out, and clear speech is the only way. There came the click, click, click as the message was compressed and multiplied for its laser jump across the solar system. With a chopping motion that carried its own subtle betrayal of self-doubt, Bickle slapped the orange transmitter key. He sank back as the transmit command sequence took over. The sound of relays snapping closed dominated the ovoid room. Do something, even if it's wrong, Flattery reminded himself. The rule books don't work out here. Now it's too late to stop Bickle. It came to Flattery then that it had been too late to stop Bickle from the moment their ship left its moon orbit. This direct authoritarian violent man, or one of his backups in the hype tanks, held the key to the Earthling's real purpose. The rest of them were just along for the ride. Bickle, it all rests on Bickle for some reason. Why? We'll find out. At the sound of the relays snapping, Timberlake reached up to a hand grip, squeezed it fiercely in frustration. He knew he could not blame Bickle for feeling angry. The dirty job of killing their last organic mental core should have fallen to the life systems engineer, but surely Bickle must know the inhibitions that had been droned into the life systems specialist. For just a moment, Timberlake allowed his mind to dwell on the sterile creche and labs back on the moon, the only home any of the Earthling's occupants had ever known. Man's greatest adventure, the jump to the stars. They had lived with that awesome concept from their first moments of awareness. Aboard the Earthling, they were a handpicked lot, 3,006 survivors of the toughest weeding out process the project directors could devise for their doppelganger charges. The final 6 had been the choicest of the choice. The umbilicus crew to monitor the ship until it left the solar system, then tie off the few manual controls and turn the 200-year crossing to Tau Ceti over to that one lonely consciousness, an organic mental core. And while the 3006 lay dormant behind the Hype Tank's water shields in the heart of the ship, their lives were to remain subject to the servos and sensors surgically linked to the OMC. So I guess that's how they deal with the radiation. They're behind water shields in the heart of the ship. Okay. But now we're 3003, Timberlake thought, with that sense of grief and shame and defeat. And our last OMC is dead. Timberlake felt alone and vulnerable now, faced by their emergency controls. He had been reasonably confident while the brains existed, and with one of them responsible for ultimate ship security. The existence of emergency controls had only added to his confidence. Now staring at the banks of switches, the gauges and telltales and manuals and auxiliary computer boards with its paired vocoder and tape code inputs and readouts. Now, Timberlake realized how inadequate were his poor human reactions in the face of the millisecond demands for even ordinary emergencies out here. The ship's moving too fast, he thought. Their speed was slow, he knew, compared to what they should have been doing at this point, but still, it was too fast. He activated a small sensor screen on his left, permitted himself a brief look at the exterior cosmos, staring out at the hard spots of brilliance that were stars against the energy void of space. As usual, the sight reduced him to the feeling that he was a tiny spark at the mercy of unthinking chance. He blanked the screen. Movement at his elbow drew Timberlake's attention. He turned to see Bickle come up to lean against the guide pole beside the control console. There was such a look of relief on his face that Timberlake had a sudden insight, realizing that Bickle had sent his guilt winging back to the moon base with that message. Timberlake wondered then what it had felt like to kill, even if the killing had involved the creature whose humanity had become hidden behind an aura of mechanistics long years back when it was removed from a dying body. mechanistics, long years back when it was removed from a dying body. Pickle studied the drive board. They had disabled the drive increment system when the second OMC had started going sour. But the Earthling still would be out of the solar system in 10 months. 10 months, Pickle thought. Too fast and too slow. During those 10 months, he computed possibility of a total ship emergency remained at its highest. The umbilicus crew had not been prepared for that kind of pressure. Pickle shot a covert glance at Flattery, noting how silent and withdrawn the psychiatrist Champlain appeared. There were times when it rasped Pickle's nerves to think how little could be hidden from Flattery. But this was not one of those times. Out here, Bickle realized each of them had to become a specialist on his companions. Otherwise, ship pressures coupled to psychological pressures might destroy them. How long do you suppose it'll take the moon base to answer? Bickle asked, directing the question at Timberlake. Flattery stiffened, studied the back of Bickle's head. The question. Such a nice balance of camaraderie and apology in the voice. Bickle had done that deliberately, Flattery realized. Bickle went deeper than they had suspected, but perhaps they should have suspected. He was, after all, the Earthling's pivotal figure. It'll take him a while to digest it, Timberlake said. I still think we should have waited. Wrong tack, Flattery thought. An overture should be accepted. He brushed a finger along one of his heavy eyebrows, moved forward with a calculated clumsiness, forcing them to be aware of him. Their first problem's public relations, Flattery said. That'll cause some delay. Their first question will be, why'd the OMCs fail? Timberlake said. There was no medical reason for it, Flattery put in. He realized he had spoken too quickly, sensed his own defensiveness. It'll turn out to be something new, something nobody anticipated. Wait and see, Timberlake said. Something nobody anticipated, Bickle wondered, and he doubted that, but held his silence. For the first time since coming aboard, he felt the bulk of the Earthling around him and thought of all the hopes and energies that had launched this venture. It occurred to him that what a mountain of hard-headed planning had gone in. It occurred to him then what a mountain of hard-headed planning had gone into the project. He sensed the sleepless nights, the skull sessions of engineers and scientists, the pragmatic dreamers tossing their ideas back and forth across coffee cups and butt-mounted ashtrays. Something nobody anticipated. Hardly. Still, 6 other ships had vanished into silence out here. 6 other ships much like their Earthling. He spoke then more to keep up his own courage than to argue. This isn't the kind of thing they'd let go by the this isn't the kind of thing they'd let go by the board. Moonbase will have a plan. Somebody somewhere along the line thought of this possibility. Then why didn't they prepare us for it? Timberlake asked. Flattery watched Bickle carefully, aware of how that question had touched him. He will begin to have doubts now, Flattery thought. Now he will start asking himself the really loaded questions. What really is going on here? There's no way they didn't plan for this contingency, is what Bickle's saying. You know, like what is the point of all of this? Chapter 2. The holoscan you are watching at this moment is the Varbickle model, our most successful organ of analysis. He is charged to explore beyond the imprisoned He is charged to explore beyond the imprinted patterns of consciousness with which humankind inherits with its genes. Let's drink some water, chat. Meow meow meow. Meow 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 meow. We're in chapter 2 now, chat. Excuse me. That feels better. The holoscan you are watching at this moment is the Varbickle model, our most successful organ of analysis. He is charged to explore beyond the imprinted patterns of consciousness which humankind inherits with its genes. He's more than human. Morgan Hempstead lectures at Moonbase. Timberlake adjusted a dial on his console to correct a failure of automatic temperature adjustment in Quad 3, Ring 9 of the ship's second shell. We should have been buttoned down in our hype tanks and on our way over the solar hump to Tau Ceti long ago, he muttered. Tim, display the time log, Flattery said. Tim, display the time log, Flattery said. Timberlake hit the green key in the upper right corner of his board, glanced at the overhead master screen's display from the laser pulse time log. 10 months plus. The indefinite answer made it seem the Earthling's computer core shared their doubts. How long to Tau Ceti? Flattery asked. At this rate? Timberlake asked. He risked a long glance away from his board. The stare he aimed at Flattery betrayed the fact that he had not thought of that possibility. Making the trip the hard way, long and slow, with the crew active all the way. Say, 400 years, give or take a few, Pickles said. It's the first question I fed into the computer after we disabled the drive increment. He's too crystal sharp, Flattery thought. He bears watching lest he shatter, and Flattery chided himself then. But the job Bickle has to do requires a man who can't shatter. Who can shatter. First thing we'd better do is bring up one replacement from the hype tanks, Bickle said. Flattery glanced to his left where Com Central's other 3 action couches lay with their cocoon arms open, empty, and waiting. Bring up only one replacement, eh? Flattery asked. Live in here? We may need occasional sleep rest periods in the chubby lockers, Bickle said, and he nodded towards the side hatch into their Spartan living quarters. But Com Central is the safest spot on the ship. What if the project orders us to abort? Timberlake asked. That won't be their first order, Bickle said. Several nations invested one hell of a pile of money and effort and dreams in this business. They have a purpose, which they won't give up easily. Too crystal sharp, Flattery thought, and he asked, Who are you nominating for D-Hybe? Prudence Weygand, MD, Bickle said. You think we need another doctor, eh? Flattery asked. I think we need Prudence Weygand. She's a doctor, sure, but she can also function as a nurse to replace Maida. She's a woman, and we may need female thinking. You have any objections to Weygand, Tim? What's my opinion worth? Timberlake muttered. You two have decided it, haven't you? Bickle already had turned toward his own action couch. He hesitated at the petulance in Timberlake's voice, then went on to the couch, pulled a full vacuum suit from the rack beneath the couch, and began suiting up. He spoke without turning. I'll take over here while you and Raj bring her out of hype. You both better suit up too and stay suited. Without an OMC at the controls, he shrugged, finished sealing the suit, and stretched out in his action couch. I'll take the red switch on the count. Timberlake was caught up in the changeover. The masterboard swung across on its travelers, stopped as it made junction with Bickle's console. What if Moonbase answers while we're in the tanks? Flattery asked. We won't be able to stop the D-Hybe and come up for a... What's to do except record the message? Bickle asked. He began adjusting hull integrity sensors. Finished that. Checked the accept and translate system. Swung the AAT board close beside him, where he could see its telltale when the Moonbase replied. Excuse me. Flattery shrugged, got his own full vacuum suit. Excuse me, we're just getting rid of the air. Flattery shrugged, got out his own full vacuum suit. He noted that Timberlake already was suiting up, but with a fumbling reluctance. Tim senses Bickle taking absolute command, Flattery thought, but he doesn't know the necessity for it, and he cannot bring himself to like it. He will, though. Bickle satisfied himself with that the ship. Bickle satisfied himself the ship was functioning as well as it could without the homeostatic control of an OMC. He sank back to watch the board as the others left Com Central. The hatch seals hissed, and there came a metallic slap of magnetic locks as the hatch closed and resealed itself. Now, Bickle felt the ship around him, as though he had neural connections to every sensor revealed on his board. The Earthling lay spread out for him, a monstrous juggernaut, yet fragile as an egg. A tin egg. Against his will, Bickle's attention drifted towards that dead light on the lower left corner of his board. The light that should have been glowing a live yellow to denote that all was well with the OMC. But all was not well with the OMC. The unsleeping brains have failed. They were stress tested for every conceivable situation, Bickle told himself. Something inconceivable happened. Or did it? Timberlake's question nagged at him. Why didn't they prepare us for it? The master board above him grew a line of yellow lights that told him the ship's gravity center had shifted. A wild shift in the gravity field had torn colony cargo from its hold downs, and killed Mida. Gently to avoid oscillations, Bickle began adjusting controls to bring the field back into line. How much simpler it would have been to get along without gravity, he thought. But medical science had never really solved the problem of human physical deterioration that resulted from existence in prolonged null gravity. The balance mechanism of the inner ear still was the most susceptible. 4 to 5 weeks without gravity brought permanent damage to some subjects. So they lived with the minimal field system, the gravity field mechanisms that had developed an unexpected deadly about here. Sorry, there's like the way that they scan this, like you can see that they should have like I really should have got a copy of this book. Now this is annoying me. Whatever. We live with our decisions. The telltale lights began to wink out. Bickle followed the balance readjustment carefully. They had only the most tenuous theory on what caused that field to shift this way. The suspected local anomalies as they moved to the solar system's own gravitational field. The last telltale went dark. Bickle sank back onto the couch, drew a deep, ragged breath. Perspiration covered his body, and he felt his suit system laboring to compensate. This watch on Com Central could be particularly could become a particular kind of hell. Bickle realized. The, the suspenseful responsibility duel with an unknown death wore you down. You controlled only the most essential ship functions. From here, monitor instruments had never been intended for this work. Fine adjustment and delicate repairs had to be ignored until they reached that point of gross demand where a crewman had to be sent out to direct the servos in their work. An increment of damage could be computed. An increment of damage could be computed, the kind of damage one thing added to another, where the ship itself would cease operating. There was a death point for the ship out ahead of them, and it could be computed as a function of damage. Bickle avoided feeding the problem into the computer. He knew his own limits. Precise knowledge of that unknown moment would hamper him unless it became a matter of immediacy. They had months yet, perhaps the full 10, and 10 months was forever, the way things now stood. The ship was far more likely to meet disaster in some other form. He could feel it. Something about the tin egg was sour. Big sour. It did not make sense to Bickle that a man had to sit here in Com Central, the strain of responsibility increasing with each heartbeat, waiting and knowing that some mechanism or balancing function of the ship was headed for trouble, yet unable to meet the problem with more than a gross, clumsy makeshift. With the OMCs, the ship balance had been finely tuned a neuroservo reflex, almost automatic, as homeostatic in response as that of a healthy human body. Bickle added his own corollary question now to the one Timberlake had posed. Why were all the eggs put in one basket? Why were the organic mental cores the one solve all the problems, right? Why didn't they give them more training? Why didn't they prepare them for this? The possibility that the OMCs would fail, right? I think that's what you're getting at. Hmm. Chapter 3. What matters most is the search itself. This is more important than the searchers. Consciousness must dream. It must have a dreaming ground, and dreaming must invoke ever new dreams. Morgan Hempstead lectures at Moonbase. Is this guy a clone too? This guy's probably, they're all probably clones, right? They're all probably clones of clones of clones of clones. As she awoke, Prudence thought, "We made it!" Excitement filled her at the thought of stepping out onto a virgin world with all its strange newness and never before problems. 6 failures were worth it. The 7th try was a charm. We have succeeded. Otherwise, her mind bogged down in sluggishness. Otherwise was a concept with several pathways out of it. The tingle ache of dehybe ran along the muscles of her arms and legs, produced transient knots of pain. She knew as a doctor the reasons for the pain, could rationalize the fact of it. Human hibernation was a far different process from animal hibernation. Not a drop of water could remain in the body, and you went so close to the borders of death that some contended you were suspended within death. She tried to sit up. It was then that she saw Timberlake and Flattery looking down at her where she lay on the lab shuttle, their expressions brought otherwise to full focus. For a moment, she looked beyond them to the tubes and stimulant plugs that had been removed from the functional contact with her body. Flattery restrained her. Easy now, Dr. Weigand, he said. Dr. Weigand, she thought. Not Prudence, not Prue, Dr. Weigand. Cold formality. She began losing that first elation. Then Flattery began explaining in his soft, soothing voice, and she knew her elation had to be put away. The contingency problem had arisen. She had been awakened for that. Contingency problem had arisen. So she kind of knew something was going to go wrong, right? Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, okay. There. Just tell me who we lost, she said, and her throat hurt from its months of disuse. Timberlake told her. 3 dead, she said. She didn't ask how they had died. The other problem, the contingency for which she had been prepared, took precedence over mere curiosity. Bickle requested you be brought out of hype, Flattery said. Does he know why? She asked, ignoring the strange look Timberlake shifted from her to Flattery. He rationalized it, Flattery said, and he wished she'd withheld these questions until they were alone. Of course he did, she said, but he hasn't posed the problem yet, Flattery said. Don't push him, she said, and glanced at Timberlake. Forget what you just heard here, Tim. Timberlake scowled, suddenly withdrawn and wary. Flattery bent over her right arm with a slapshot hypo in his hand. Must you? She asked. Then, yes, of course. There's nothing for you to do right now except recuperate, he said, and pressed the slapshot against her arm. He felt the mechanisms kick, and presently the soft spread of narcosis. Flattery and Timberlake became wavering fingers, haloed in light. At least Bickle is still alive, she thought. We do not have to replace Tim with a backup. Take second best. And just before sinking into the downing cloud of sleep, she wondered, how did Maida die? Lovely Maida who... Timberlake watched the film of withdrawal wash over her light blue eyes. Her breathing took on a soft regularity. As life... So... I don't remember everything that happens in these books. I read these so long ago, but yeah, so she knows something went wrong, and she's in on some sort of secret with Flattery, Champlain psychiatrist, and Tim is just totally in the dark. He has no idea anything that's happening here, even though he's the one who's technically supposed to be in charge as the engineer. Timberlake watched the film of withdrawal wash over her light blue eyes. Her breathing took on soft regularity. As life systems specialist, Timberlake had checked the computer-filled tape flag for every person on the tin egg. He recalled now that Prudence Lawn Weigand was classed superb as a surgeon, superior 9 in tool facility, and the scale went only to 10. He reflected now on her strange conversation with Flattery and realized the tape had not told the full story. She obviously had ship functions beyond surgeon and ecologist, and at least one of these functions concerned Bickle. Forget what you just heard here, Tim. Timberlake could still hear that cold-voiced command, and he knew it did not square with the emotional index on Prudence Lawn Weigand's tapes. There, she was listed as Place 9D Green on the compassionate vector. In the close quarters living of this umbilicus crew, that emotional index posed problems because of its tightly linked sex drive. With a sense of shock, Timberlake took a closer look at her feed tube spectrum on the Hybe chart, saw that she had been fed the sex-suppressant anti-S drugs even under Hybe. She had been kept ready. Ready for what? He asked himself. Flattery closed and locked her litter cocoon, said, She'll sleep until she's almost back to normal. We'd better get her a full vac suit out of stores. She'll need it when she comes out. Timberlake nodded, made a last check on the few remaining life system linkages into her litter. Flattery was acting very odd, mysterious. You can ignore all the conversations, you can ignore all that conversation as she woke up, Flattery said. Common D-hype confusion. You know how it is. Oh my god, gaslighting! Gaslighting! No, Tim, no! But she was fed anti S drugs in hibernation, Timberlake thought. Flattery nodded toward the hatch in Com Central, said, John's been almost 4 hours alone on the board. Time to get some relief. Timberlake finished his inspection of the litter gauges, turned, led the way through the hatch. Seeing the wary, thoughtful look on Timberlake's face, Flattery thought, damn, that woman's big mouth. If Tim says the wrong thing to Bickle now, it could muddy the whole project. Whoopsies. Chapter 4. The legal status of the clone as property cannot be questioned. This is a decision we have taken as a species for the survival of the species. The clone is a spare parts bank and much more. The clone falls outside the legal prohibition against experiments upon humans without their informed consent. Clones are property, and that's that. Morgan Hempstead, lectures at Moonbase. Bickle heard Flattery and Timberlake enter Com Central, but was forced to keep his attention on the big board. An odd time pulse had appeared in the primary loops of the navigational analog banks of the computer. It appeared and vanished with no apparent cause. Each oddity of the computer function forced a review of that basic question. Why had the OMCs failed? Was this strange pulse a thing for which the brains were unprepared? How could it be when every last OMC circuit tested open and operating? How could it be when every last OMC circuit tested open and operating? The answer to the OMC failure lay in the psychological area, Bickle felt. The seed of the problem was in that one place where they could not stick their probes, in the gray matter that once had been part of a human. Well, I know how we have to tackle this mess, Bickle thought, but will the others go along? Wonder what his solution is. He's some sort of genius, apparently. Or at least the hero that they need. Bickle heard Flattery slide onto his own action couch. Risked a glance at the man. Flattery might be difficult to handle. Flattery was an MD, and ship trained, yes. He could stand a watch, repair the simpler servos and sensors, and obey the ordinary precautions that spelled out life system security. There was another Flattery, though, the psychiatrist Champlain. To Bickle, the psychiatrist half of the man suggested special usefulness. But the enigma of the Champlain offered only mysticism and open-ended arguments. I never know which mask Flattery's wearing, Bickle thought. He wished that there could have been a way to avoid having a Champlain on the tin egg. But there had been no way. The world's religious millions paid an enormous amount of taxes. The psychiatrists in training, Flattery, and his backups had approached the job sincerely. They had had little choice. It had been a long time since psychiatrists denied that they served a witch doctor function, and the step from witch doctor to divine was a short one. Timberlake came up beside Bickle, studied the gauge which showed the time pulse in the navigational analog banks. That acts like a Doppler reference pulse from the time log, he said. You been checking our position? No, Bickle said. And as he spoke, the answer to his variant pulse clicked home in his mind. He had set up a telltale warning net in the computer to alert him when the ship damage reached a critical point. Damage to the navigational system could be most critical, especially internal damage. But unlike destruction of hardware, that internal damage would only betray itself by position errors. His telltale circuitry had alerted one of the ship computers master oh my god. His telltale circuitry had alerted one of the ship computer's master programs. A running Doppler reference check was being made on their position. Bickle shifted to the computer board, ran a series trial on the navigational loops, read the induced resonance off the pulsing gauges. It checked. He explained what was happening. The computer acts almost human, Flattery said. Bickle and Timberlake exchanged a knowing smile. Almost human indeed. The damn thing merely was doing what it was designed to do. You better take the computer schematics and the designs and have a real skull session on what the lack of an OMC may be doing to it, Timberlake said. Bickle nodded. He was thankful then that Timberlake was, in many respects, as good an electronics man as anyone on the ship. The necessary foundation for his specialty. There was always that almost qualification on his abilities, though. Life systems work trapped the men into a generalist corner. They knew plenty of biophysics, but they were not doctors. They were adept in electronics, but fell short of that smooth juggling of variables which marked the creative engineer. You ready for a break, John? Flattery asked. Anytime. How's Prue? Doc- Dr. Weyand is asleep now, Flattery said. He needs a few more hours recuperation. Why is he so formal? Bickle wondered. Raj must know I shared classes with her. She was always Prue then. Why should she suddenly be Dr. Weyand? I'll take the board on the count, Flattery said, and they began the change of watch. Timberlake, sensing Bickle's questions, realized that Flattery's emphasis on Dr. Weyand had not been aimed at the electronics engineer. Raj was saying something to me, Timberlake thought. He was telling me that Dr. Weyand may have had medical reasons for her strange behavior. Raj is telling me to keep my mouth shut. And Timberlake found himself resenting the fact that Flattery had found the warning necessary. Bickle closed off his link to the controls, slipped off his couch, and began exercising the stiffness out of his muscles. Remembering the classes he had shared with Prue Weyand, computer math, servo sensor repair, chip function, he recalled the woman. She was a disturbing female plus creature, sensitive with her feelings, all too apparent. Bickle realized then that a photograph of Prue Weyand in repose would show a rather unassuming woman with regular features and a good but not sensational figure. She was the kind of who attracted male stares, though. She radiated some vital sparking thing, especially when she walked. Is that why I chose her? Bickle wondered. He broke off his exercises to consider the question. The Prue kind of woman presented a source of trouble in an otherwise all male crew, unless they all went on anti S. They couldn't afford to dull their faculties that way. I chose her because in a ship of quintuple backup, she appears unique, Bickle reassured himself. She's trained in ecology, medicine, and computer math. She's going to be damned useful to us. But doubts remained. He's thinking about her body, maybe. Bickle forced them out of his mind by looking around Com Central, focusing his attention on the ship. The ship computer hibernating colonists here was one set of resources that Bickle felt they could fit into a logical pigeonhole, assess and weigh, and use as they needed. He sensed the ship stretching out from him in its 16 concentric shells, a great ovoid bulk almost a mile across its long axis. Beyond the water barrier and baffles that shielded the core lay miles of corridors and tubeways, self-sealing compartments. Though it all stretched the organized clutter of material needed to make life possible for humans in an alien environment. Oh, through it all stretched the organized clutter of material needed to make life possible for humans in an alien environment. In the hype tanks, they had 2,000 adult humans, 1,000 human embryos, and more than 6,000 animal embryos, a full ecological spectrum. Bickle turned, looked at his own computer board. His plan involved a dangerous risk to the computer, but the risk was necessary. The others might fight him, but they would have to come around. He looked at Flattery, busy on the big board. Timberlake taking a relaxing massage on his action couch. He looked back at the computer board. The Tin Eggs computer was basically a multi-system system, which with internal ruby laser real-time clocks to log its own experiences. It incorporated more than 800,000 specialized routines installed by a prodigious spending of manpower. 800,000 only? I think we can do better than that nowadays. Bickle weighed the computer's untried potential. Its try a nanosecond thought put and multi-scheduling faculties allowed it to interleave thousands of programs simultaneously. It could monitor sequencing queuing and input through a core memory with enormous reserves of trapping functions, branching operations, and alarm system networks. With an OMC tied in as a supervisory program as a supreme decision maker, the computer and the ship it controlled had been a living creature of metal. But three brains had failed in that delicately powerful linkage, and Bickle, the pragmatist, trusted only that which worked. Without an OMC, the ship computer remained an inert mass of machinery whose output on demand followed a fixed design and could be accepted or rejected only after a human decision. How long until Prue will be with us? Bickle asked. About 3 hours, Timberlake said. I want her opinion on the post-mortem, Bickle said. I'm not satisfied with what we found in the first two brains. Timberlake shut down his couch massage, directed a probing stare at Flattery. The psychiatrist Champlain only smiled, reminding himself that Bickle was logic-prone, with a disregard of everything except the main line of reasoning, that made him sound boorish at times. Moonbase will ask some questions for which you have no answers, Bickle said. We can't afford to sound fumbling. He looked at Timberlake. They're going to take us apart one by one. Life systems were perfect, Timberlake snapped. We'd better be able to prove it, Bickle said. I went through the entire console when Brain 1 failed, Timberlake said. Check it yourself. I did. A couple of things bothered me. Brain 1 preferred to be called Myrtle. Why? I find nothing in the memory core to explain that, except that Brain 1 was removed from a genetic monster that probably was female. Myrtle's personal life system tested within 0.0002 of homeostatic sensor on Anders' base, Timberlake said. Don't let that identify preference seduce you. Don't let that identity preference seduce you, Flattery said. It was for our benefit, so we could anthropomorphize the ship OMC. Yeah, Pickle said. So they wanted to make it seem more human. Oh, that's Myrtle. Yeah, Pickle said. That's the reason they each gave us. Don't let that identity preference seduce you, Flattery said. It was for our benefits, so we could anthropomorphize the ship OMC. Yeah, Pickle said. That's the reason they each gave, but is it the right one? Those brains were as perfect as any ever born, Flattery said, and he wondered why he allowed Pickle's attitude to irritate him. Okay, they were raised from infancy as part of the total ship sensor servo system. So what? They didn't know any other life or want. You said a couple of things were bothering you, Timberlake interrupted. What's the other one? Your life systems report, Pickle said. Entry 9107 on Myrtle, it says, none of the systems appear to have been at fault. Why'd you use the word appear, Tim? You have some doubts that you couldn't enter in the report? Not a damn one, Timberlake said. Those systems were perfect. Then why didn't you just say so? He was only being cautious, Flattery said. If you have checked the records, you'll find my medical report confirms his findings in every respect. Except one, Pickle said. And what is that? Timberlake asked. He glared at Pickle, his face flushed, a muscle worked along his jaw. Pickle ignored the signs of anger, said, nothing explains the internal burn damage that Raj found in those brains. Internal burn damage, you say, especially along the overlarge axon collaterals of the afferent side. What the devil do you mean overlarge? Overlarge compared to what? A main channel leading into the brain's higher sensors was about 4 times the size of anything I have ever seen, Flattery said. I don't know why, but I can guess it was compensatory growth. These OMCs had to handle many more incoming data bits from more sensors than the normal human ever encounters. You'll note that the frontal lobes were larger too, but the the design specs on the OMC process explain all that, Pickle said. Compensatory growth, yeah, but I don't find one word about large axon collaterals. Not one word. These brains had been in the system longer than any others ever examined, Timberlake said. The literature reports on only on 4 previously that died of natural causes, and we natural causes, Bickle asked. What's a natural cause fatal to an OMC? You know what happened as well as I do, Flattery said. Accidents, irritant matter in the food bath, a radiation shield left down for human error, not OMC error, Bickle snapped, not natural. And here's another thing. Myrtle lapsed into catatonia, or whatever you want to call it, just 10 days, 14 hours, 8 minutes, and 11 seconds from Moonbase. We threw little Joe into service, and he lasted 6 days, 9 hours, 1 second. So we turned the ship over to Harvey, our last chance, and Harvey took 15 hours even, kaput. Greater and greater stress, and they broke down faster and faster, Flattery said. But you'll notice that the last words from each betrayed a type of deterioration akin to Akin? Bickle sneered. That's what you see all through these damn reports. Something similar to, a condition that reminds one of, akin to. He glared from Flattery to Timberlake. The truth is, we don't know what the hell goes on in OMC's gray matter. A clicking buzzing erupted from the masterboard above Flattery. They got a message. Pickle waited while Flattery fought out a manual temperature adjustment in an inner hold. Oh, no, they just have to... they're controlling the systems on the ship. Pickle waited while Flattery fought out a manual temperature adjustment in an inner hold. Presently, Flattery wiped perspiration from his forehead, studied his gauges to be certain the balance was holding. Man, that board is murder, Timberlake muttered. I don't wonder those OMCs caved in. Flattery risked a glance away from the board. You know better than that, Tim. This part of the job was child's play for a functioning OMC. They could handle most ship homeostasis problems by something akin to reflex action. Akin, Pickle said. All right, Flattery barked and pretended to be busy with the board to hide his confusion at allowing Pickle to get him that way. A long silence settled over Com Central, broken when Flattery regained his composure and said, I was about to say that the end tapes on each brain show statements similar to schizophrenic writing. It makes a pretense of meaning and sometimes stumbles onto a colorful phrase. But the essential, he broke off as the master board grew three diagonal stripes of flashing yellow. Flattery's hands darted to the controls as Bickle shouted, Grav shift! And dove for his couch. Cocoons snapped closed around them, and they felt the creeping, jerking weight shifts, the runaway fluctuations of the field centering system, the unexplained gravity variance that had killed Maida. Interesting. Grav shift. So the gravity changed on the ship, and I think it splatted Maida against the wall or something like that. Disgusting. Do 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 dum dum da dum da da dum dum da da dum da da dum 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 da da dum dee 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 da 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 dum da dum dee 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 na na num 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 da na num da 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 dum da dum da 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 dum dum da da dum dee 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 da 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 meow meow. All right, chapter 5, chat. Chapter 5. The thing about computers, it's like training a dog. You have to be smarter than the dog. If you make a computer smarter than you are, that has to be an accident, synergy, or divine intervention. To make a computer smarter than you are, interesting. Accident, synergy, or divine intervention. Interview with John Bickle, the original. The original Bickle. So this is the guy that the guy on the ship was cloned from. John Bickle at La Paz. The smartest guy, Bickle. Bickle watched Flattery's hands fight the gravity system back into balance. It had taken several bruising minutes, but the tugging and jerking had begun to ease. The system centered slowly. Flattery waited it out. Presently, he made fine adjustments in the controls. Where are we? Timberlake asked. We were raking through our data, seeking anything useful, Bickle said. The clumsy way to operate, but necessary. Guilt sharing, Flattery said. What? Bickle was outraged. Never mind, Flattery said. Back to square one. You will recall that the OMC Myrtle said, I have no incarnation. That may have been the only accurate thing in her jabbering. After all, except for gray matter, she had no flesh. But then, remember, after a long silence, she said, I'm counting my fingers. She had no fingers, no conscious memory of fingers. And that final question, why are you all so dead? The best guess is that any meaning in those statements and questions was purely accidental. I think she was referring to us, to the crew, Pickle said. It's nuts, yes, but it was a direct question over the vocoders, and we were the only possible audience. Unless she was referring to the colonists in the hive tanks, Flattery said. They might appear dead under some. Myrtle had direct contact with the hive tank sensors, Timberlake pointed out. She'd have known if they were alive. Bickle nodded. What do you make of Little Joe roaring out over every vocoder? How do you vocoder? I think it's vocode. Go counter. Vocoder. Oh, the vocoder. 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 Pickle nodded. What do you make of Little Joe roaring over every vocoder in the ship? I'm awake. God help me. I'm awake. A cry for help, perhaps, Flattery said. Most insane raving is a cry for help in one form or another. That leaves Harvey, Pickle said. Harvey screamed, You're forcing me to be unhealthy. And when we. What could we do? Timberlake asked, and Pickle heard the note of hysteria in his voice. There was nothing wrong with any of their life systems. I know there wasn't. Easy does it, Tim, Flattery said. That was just another nonsense statement. We all knew what it meant, though, Pickle said. I did not see anybody showing surprise when Harvey said, I've lost it, and signed off permanently. And there we were with 3 dead brains and no spares. The callous way Pickle put it sent a shudder through Timberlake, and he could not explain it. He had never been deeply attached to the OMCs. There had always been something faintly accusing about the ship creatures. Ship creatures. That's so these brains had never been in a human body. They were just raised in a vat, or they were raised in some sort of creature and then removed. Disgusting. And so some of them had memories of being human. I'm looking at my hands, right? I'm counting my fingers. She had no fingers, no conscious memory of fingers. So where did that memory come from? Where did that vision come from? There had always been something faintly accusing about the ship creatures. Rahalan Flattery had assured him that this was strictly subjective, something from his own attitudes. Raj had always been so positive that the OMC ship computer entities were perfectly reconciled to their way of life, happy with their own compensations. What compensations? Timberlake wondered. Expectancy of long life? What is 300 or 400 years of living if each year is hell? Timberlake realized then that none of the past answers from his training classes really touched the basic issue of OMC happiness. What if it really is a hellish way to live? He wondered. It must be. They are harnessed like engines to all this. They're harnessed like engines to all this metal and glass and plastic, and time stretches out ahead of them forever. Maybe death was preferable. They killed themselves. Chapter 6. Every symbol has hidden premises behind it. Every word carries unspoken assumptions buried in the history of the language and the conditioned experiences of the speakers. If you snatch those buried meanings out of your words, you spill a whole stream of new understanding into awareness. But some of those meanings are buried so deep you will never know. Rahalan Flattery. The Book of Ship. And this is a clone at least, Rahalan Flattery. Because he has the lawn. What's the Book of Ship, though? What do you mean? Almost half of Prudence Wagon's recuperation time had passed, and it had been marked by recurrent uncomfortable silences in Calm Central. Flattery did not like those silences. He felt that every one of them carried his companions farther away, perhaps beyond control, and he had to maintain that delicate contact, that means of control. One of these silences gripped them now. It seemed to reach into them from the space beyond the ship's hull. Flattery knew that he had to say something, but he felt oppressed by the silence. He cleared his throat before speaking. I wish to say something about anger. I've seen several shows of anger since our emergency, my own anger included. The formal tone the set of his face, all signaled that Flattery was speaking officially as their Champlain. Anger could destroy us, he said. The Proverbs warn us, he that is soon angry dealeth foolishly, and a man of wicked devices is hated. He that is slow to wrath is of great understanding, but he that is hasty of spirit exalteth folly. Let us practice the soft answer, and not stir up wrath. Bickle took a deep breath. Flattery was right, he knew, but Bickle resented the way the man retreated into religion to make his point. How much simpler just to say they were clouding their reason with excess emotion. That was the thing he resented about religion, Bickle thought. The way it appealed to emotion rather than intelligence. We've been floundering around trying to do too much, Bickle said. That masterboard is a jury-rigged monstrosity. We need a consistent, organized plan to meet our problems. When Moonbase answers, I want to be able to say we have sharp, heavy G force pressed him against the side of his couch cocoon. It struck without klaxon warning or alarm light. Cocoon's safety locks sealed home. Now red alarm lights flashed with the yellow and long webs across the master board. Flattery slammed the gravity disconnect with the heel of his left hand. G-force ebbed. Yellow alarm lights winked off as the pressure switches released. A line of red alarm lights remained. Damage to Hull 3, Section 6, 14. Flattery said. He began activating remote sensors to inspect the area. What's causing this damage, though? Is our systems just failing, right? Without conscious thought or discussion, Bickle took over ship command. Tim, take the G repeaters, leave gravity disconnected while you trace the relays, and give the system back in balance. Timberlake pulled his board close to obey. Bickle swung the AAT board to his side, keyed for ship system computer control, and began feeding coded demands into the core recorders. What had the ship encountered that might explain the brutal deflection? What had the automatic sensors recorded? The responders began kicking out tape almost immediately, much too fast. Data error, Flattery said, reading the output over Bickle's shoulder. In abrupt fury, Bickle pulled the master override stop from his core switch, jammed a set of jumper jacks across the AAT controls, opened the core system for standard reference comparison. You are into the core, Flattery said, his voice sharp with fear. You have no guide, fuse, or master reference. You could louse up the command routines. Unhook that, Timberlake shouted, lifting his head from the cocoon clamps to glare across at Bickle. Shut up, both of you. Sure, the core is delicate, but something in there is already loused up, bad enough to kill us. You think you have time to check something 800,000? You think you have time to check some 800,000 routines? Timberlake demanded. Don't talk nuts. There are specific injunctions against what you are doing, Flattery said, fighting to keep his voice reasonable. And you know why. Don't try to tell me my job, Bickle said. While he spoke, Bickle rolled over core memory responders, direct contact, doing it gently to avoid current backlash. You make one mistake, Timberlake said, and it would take 6,000 or 7,000 technicians with the second master system and several thousand imprint relays to repair the damage. Are you ready to... Stop distracting me! What are you looking for? Flattery asked, interested in spite of his fear. He had realized that Bickle, conditioned to deep inhibitions against turning back, was incapable of doing anything to deprive them of one of their basic tools. I'm checking availability of peripherals from the core memory, Bickle said. There's got to be a bypass or pile up somewhere. It'll show in acquisitions and phase control loops of the input. He nodded toward a diagnostic meter on his board. And here we are. The meter's needle slammed against its pin, fell back to zero, stayed there. Slowly, Bickle ordered a master diagnostic routine into direct contact, put the core standard back on fused auxiliary, began rolling the troublesome core memory section, working with only occasional references to the core standard. He forced the routine through the data reference channels as modified by new sensor input. Error branchings began clicking from his responders. Bickle translated it aloud as the code figures appeared on the screen above his board. Core memory. Prediction region rendered inactive. Proton mass and scatter relative to ship's course. Mass. Speed did not agree with prediction. Aside, Bickle said, we're hitting something other than hydrogen, and hitting it in unexpected concentrations, partly because of our speed mass figure. Solar winds, Timberlake whispered. They said we... Solar winds hell, Bickle said. Look at that. He nodded at the core groupings as it worked its way across the screen. 26 protons in the mass, Timberlake said. Iron, Bickle said. Free atoms of iron out here. We're getting a plain old-fashioned magnetic deflection of the grav field. We'll have to slow the ship, Timberlake said. Nuts, Bickle was emphatic. We'll Put a fused overload breaker in the G systems. I don't see why the devil the designers didn't do that in the first place. Perhaps they couldn't conceive of any force large enough to deflect the system, Flattery said. No doubt. Pickle's voice was heavy with disgust. When I think a simple cage switch with a weight in it could have prevented Maida's death. They depended on the OMC's reflexes too, Flattery said. You know that. What I know is that they thought in straight lines when they should have been thinking in the round, Pickle said. He unlocked his safety cocoon, shifted his suit to portable, launched himself diagonally across Com Central to the tool and repair hatch. The weightless drifting reminded him that they had time limit on returning to gravity conditions. Too long without gravity, and the crew would suffer permanent physical damage. So Pickles over here checking. He went into the core. He went into the actual programming of the computer, and he found that they overlooked something so simple. Something so simple and tiny that could have prevented poor Maida's death. And had that happened, they never would have revived Prue. Prue, who seemingly Bickle is attracted to. He's thinking about her sexy body. Well, it wasn't even sexy, right? Just feminine body. Interesting. Meow, 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 meow. Meow, meow, meow. We're just waiting for our water to heat up, chat. We can continue on reading, but intermission time. Yum, beam, bee, dee, dee. Dim, dim, dee, 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 dee. Dim, dum, 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 da, da, dum. Dee, 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 dee. Chapter 7. I considered the being whom I had cast among mankind and endowed with the will and power to effect purposes of horror. Ooh. I considered the being whom I had cast among mankind endowed with the will and power to effect purposes of horror, a being a being who I myself had formed and endued with life, had met to me at midnight among the precipices of an inaccessible mountain. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Bickle grabbed a hatch handle to steady himself and swung out to the repair traveler. He opened a panel to get at the gravity system, identified the cables, and bent to his work. He went about it silently, angrily, with swift, decisive movements, and all the time he thought about their dilemma. Iron. Free ions of iron out here? Possible, but there was a simpler answer to the anomaly, something that would produce an illusory report on their instruments. Was it possible that some part of the ship's computer reporting system had been concealed from them, shielded away from their prying? He knew it would, he knew it not only was possible, but probable. Why would Moonbase do that? The complete answer escaped him, but he knew he would have to continue probing for it. Presently, he had an improvised cage switch clamped into the main power cable. Presently, he had an improvised cage switch clamped into the main power cable into the gravity generator. He made the connections into the breaker, tested the circuits with a false load, replaced the cover plate. It'll have to be reset manually each time, he said. He put a foot against the bulkhead, propelled himself back to his couch, locked in, glanced at Timberlake. System balanced? Near as you can tell from here, Timberlake said. Give it a try, Raj. Flattery checked to see that both Timberlake and Bickle were sealed in their cocoons. Close the gravity switch. The sound of the generators building up grew to a faint hiss that subsided as the system stabilized. Flattery felt the pressure against his shoulder blades reached up to their board, slowly refined Timberlake's settings. Tim, Bickle said, I want the schematics for the OMC chamber, every sensor type coded for functions, and laid out in layers from gross to fine. I need the same thing for the servo control, a complete. Why? Timberlake asked. Are you thinking of tying in a colonist's brain? Flattery demanded, trying to hide his feelings of outrage at the idea. A mature human brain probably wouldn't survive such a transfer, Timberlake said, and he felt shame at how much the thought had appealed to him. Every inhibition of his training cried out against such a move. But if the OMC system were restored, none of them here ever again would have to undergo the nerve-crushing responsibility of that Com Central master board. He looked up at the live green arrow, denoting that Flattery had the controls. Felt himself go clammy with fear at the thought of that hell swinging back to his position. What the hell? Bickle snapped. Where did you two get that idea? Not from anything I said. He lifted his head from the cocoon clamps, looked from Timberlake to Flattery. We don't know what happened to our three perfect brains. Why the devil do I want to tie in an untested one? He sank back. It's impossible anyway. A man should have some say in what's done to him. How could we pull everyone from the hype tanks? We can't wake them all. You thinking of dismantling the OMC controls and converting us to a closed ecological system? Flattery asked. If you are, you should. Interesting. So they suppose that he wanted the schematics so that they could put a new brain in there and that new brain would be in control. But if they don't know what went wrong with the original brains, how could they put a new brain in there? And how could they force a man from hibernation? Because he certainly is not going to be the one to do it. How could they force the man from the ship, the tanks, and they never go through all the ship's tanks and find the right person, right? He got so mad. He got so mad. So funny. I don't think we're gonna finish this book today. Looking at it, a lot longer than I thought. Honestly. Na 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 dum dum da dum da da dum. Dee 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 dee. Na 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 num na 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 num dum dum da dum da da dum dee 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 dee. You thinking of dismantling the OMC controls and converting us to a closed ecological system? Flattery asked. If you are, you should. He broke off as the high pitched buzzing hum of the AAT receiver filled the room, alerting them that a message was being processed. Here it is! Pickle followed the play of lights across his board as the message was gulped by the receivers. Fed through the comparison blocks, refined to a single playback, with probable accuracy quotient logged beside each character, and finally was slowed to make it intelligible for human ears. For human ears. Sure as hell took him long enough, Pickle thought. He read the time log, subtracted the distance lag. Almost 7 hours. He thought then of the first ships using signal channel radio, punching their messages across the solar system with only a few watts. But the error uncertainty factor built up with distance and cumulative adverse interference. The tin egg systems had been engineered for computer monitored automatic reports over stellar distances to tell watchers as yet unborn back on Earth how things fared with their star probe. The message ready chime sounded. Bickle keyed the vocoder. The voice of Morgan Hempstead. The Morgan Hempstead, the one that we've been reading about. The voice of Morgan Hempstead, United Moonbase director, rolled out of the speakers, recognizable and still with its iced iron overtones preserved by the AAT's comparators. To UMB ship Earthling from Project Control, this is Morgan Hempstead. We hope you understand our distress and concern. Every decision from this point must have a prime motive of preserving the lives of yourselves and the colonists. So much for the record, Flattery thought. There are 7 nations and 4 races represented in the hype tanks, but all just as expendable as but all just as expendable as the ones who went before us. We have several prime questions, Hempstead said. I have a few questions of my own, Biggle thought. Why was Project Control not alerted when the first organic mental core failed? Hempstead asked. Biggle mentally logged the question. He knew the answer, but it was nothing he would ever transmit. Hempstead knew it as well as he did. The tin egg had momentum as an idea that had survived. The tin egg had momentum as an idea that had survived 6 failures. Nothing short of another ultimate failure would stop it. Nothing short of a desperate emergency could make them risk aborting the mission by calling for help. Doppler reference indicates that you'll be out of the star system in approximately 316 days at present stabilized speed, Hempstead said. Time to Tau Ceti, 400 plus years. As he listened, Bickle pictured the man behind the voice, flint-like face with gray hair and gray blue eyes, that aura of momentous decision even in his smallest gesture. The psych boys had called him Big Daddy behind his back, but they had jumped when he commanded. Now Bickle focused on the fact that they never again expected to see Hempstead. Yet the man still could reach into their midst with his decisions. First analysis indicates these possibilities, Hempstead went on. You could turn back to orbit around UMB until the problem is solved and new organic mental cores installed. That would return us to the old problem of sterile control under less than ideal conditions. It also would remove the ship from the situation of probable cause in the OMC breakdowns, perhaps making solution impossible. He always was a long-winded bore, Timberlake said. Second possibility, Hempstead said, would be for you to convert to a closed ecology and continue at present speed, enlisting replacements from your hibernation tanks, or breeding and raising your own crew complement. You would, of course, face high probability of genetic damage to the necessity of staying outside your core shielded areas long enough to build quarters for prolonged occupation. However, food would be your major problem unless you adopted a more closely integrated recycling system. Closely integrated recycling, Flattery said. He means cannibalism. It was discussed. Pickle turned to stare at Flattery. The idea of cannibalism was repellent, but that was not what had caught Pickle's attention. It was discussed. The simple statement contained volumes of unanswered questions and hidden implications. It was discussed. They knew that the colonists might have to eat each other. Hilarious. Before they reach Tau Ceti, because maybe things go wrong when they reach the planet and they have to eat each other there, which probably shouldn't be the case with all the stuff that they have on the ship. Genetic material from animals, and there's food. There's food. There should be food when they get there. So, yeah, they discussed cannibalism on the trip too. Third possibility, Hempstead was saying, would be to build the necessary consciousness into your robo pilot, using the ship computer as a basis. Our computations indicate you have sufficient materials, including neuron packages intended for colony robots in your stores. This is theoretically feasible. Theoretically feasible, Timberlake sneered. Does he think we've never heard about all the failures in Shh, Flattery hissed. Project Council suggests present Project Council suggests you continue present course and speed, Hempstead said, as long as you are within the solar system. If a solution has not been reached by then, present opinion is that you'll be ordered to turn back. Therefore, there followed a long silence then. Unless you have alternative suggestions. You'll be ordered to turn back, Flattery thought. He turned to see how those key words sat with Bickle. They were aimed at Bickle, contrived for him, fitted specifically to trigger his deepest motives. They want him to think of a way to keep on going, because Bickle has been trained, programmed, whatever like is in his brain. It's conditioned to always strive to push forward, always find solutions. So them saying that they're gonna call you back is like, okay, Bickles, what can I do? What can I do before they put this into action? What's he gonna do? And they suggested making a new brain, right? Would be to build the necessary consciousness to build an AI into your robo pilot. So they have a robo pilot, but the AI, so the OMCs, the organic mental cores were the ones that were guiding the robo pilot. So they need a new organic mental core. Using these neuron packages. Interesting. Hmm. Bickle lay in a thoughtful silence, staring up at the speech microscope display above the vocoder, checking the accuracy of the message reception. This time, Hempstead said, Project Control requires a detailed report on condition of all ship systems with special reference to hibernating colonists. It is recognized that prolonging the voyage increases probability of hibernation failure. We recognize that you must replace crew losses from the tanks. Suggestions on replacements will be made upon request. We share your grief at the unfortunate accidents among you, but the project must continue. Detailed report on all ship systems, Timberlake said. He's out of his mind. How cold was Hempstead's commiseration, Flattery thought. The phrasing betrayed the care with which it had been composed. Just enough grief, not too much. The vocoder emitted a filtered dulled crackling. The vocoder emitted a filtered dulled crackling. Then, this is Morgan Hempstead, closing transmission. Acknowledge and answer out questions immediately. UMB out. The moon base, United Moon Base, UMB. They left too much unsaid, Bickle said. He sensed the deletions for reasons of policy all through the message. The thin political line that they walked had been betrayed most in what was not said. Build consciousness into our computer, Timberlake growled. How stupid can they get? He glanced at Bickle. You were on one of the original attempts at UMB, John. You get the honor of telling Big Daddy where he can shove that idea? That attempt flopped and badly, Bickle agreed. But it's still the only real course open to us. So he's decided. He knows we have to make consciousness. But how? Timberlake raged on as though he hadn't heard. There were people on the UMB fiasco who made us look like a pack of amateurs. Flattery had heart, though, and he hid a knowing smile by turning away and speaking mildly. We all read the report, Tim. The only part worth reading was their summations. Timberlake pitched his voice in a sneering falsetto. Impossible of achievement at present level of technology. That was an excuse, not a summation, Bickle said. And he thought back to the UMB's fruitless search for the artificial consciousness factor. There had always been that sterile wall between his part of the group and the station personnel, but the triple glass walls had never hidden the smell of failure. It had been all around the project from the beginning. It had been lost in tangles of pseudo-neuron fiber, in winking lights and the snap of relays, the hiss of tape reels, and the bitter ozone smell of burnt insulation from overloaded circuits. They had looked for a mechanical way to do what the least among them could do with his own flesh. Be conscious, and they had failed. Over them all had hung the unspoken fear, the knowledge of what had happened to the one project that reportedly had achieved success, and its own doom, back on the surface of Earth. So they did achieve consciousness once, apparently. Over them all had hung the unspoken fear, the knowledge of what had happened to the one project that reportedly had achieved success and its own doom, back on the surface of Earth. Timberlake cleared his throat, lifted a hand out of his couch cocoon, studied his fingernails. How are we going to answer the damn questions? They must be living in a dream world back there, expecting us to produce a detailed report on ship systems without the help of an OMC. But they had to ask for it, Bickle said. And we'll have to doctor up some kind of report. Bickle looked at Flattery. You can cook up a report for us, Hempstead. You can cook up a report for Hempstead, Raj. Psychiatrists are expert at deception. At times, this Bickle is uncommonly aware of subtleties, Flattery thought. I must warn Prudence. All of us renounce deception, John. Just like we renounced birth and parents, Bickle said. It was easy. Somebody did it for us. Flattery knew he had to speak quickly before this conversation devolved into self-pity. He kept his attention on a tiny paint flaw in the hard black. He kept his attention on a tiny paint flaw in the hard-baked surface of the master board. Chose his words carefully. The ship has to have conscious direction for the long haul, John. It has to. The trip involves too many unknowns that have to be dealt with on conditions of immediacy. But what do we do? You're asking me? Bickle asked. You're the psychiatrist. But I'm not the motivator here, Flattery thought. I'm not the one who can inject purpose into our efforts. This is going to require more direct methods, he said. Bickle stared at him. Well, what are you going to tell them? Timberlake asked. They want to know why we didn't alert them when the first brain conked out. Of all the... There's another thing, Bickle said, shifting his attention to Timberlake. They give us no code for that particular emergency. Are we to assume they thought it impossible for the OMCs to fail? We are not. We have to assume they had some other motive. They put the threshold high on that one for a specific purpose. Ah, for hell's sake, Timberlake protested. You're finding boogeymen where they don't exist, Bick. Bickle shook his head from side to side. No. They were telling us in no uncertain terms that once we blew the whistle, we were on our own. We have to find our own long-haul driver for the tin egg. He's circling around it, Flattery thought. When will he zero in? So tasty, so warm. Mm-mm-mm. Pickle wet his lips with his tongue. This borderline conversation, skirting the need for a consciousness to command the ship, disturbed him deeply. He was too honest with himself to ignore this fact. Timberlake, picking up the threads of a previous conversation, said, "There was no physical reason for those brains to fail. The life systems were perfect. It's as though they committed suicide under some unknown stress." With an abrupt gesture, Pickle shifted his AAT board into transmit phase. "Okay, we'll stall them on their detailed report. They know it'll take time anyway. As to why we didn't alert them either, I've decided to tell them flatly it was because they goofed and didn't give us a code for this particular emergency. If they, you'll only get Hempstead angry," Flattery said. "Hempstead angry will be more help to us than Hempstead cool and devious," Pickle said. "The angry man will make mistakes. He'll let some real help slip through to us." "What makes you think Big Daddy would try to foul us up?" Timberlake asked. "He's a political administrator. Even if it's unconscious." Pickle hesitated. An idea had flicked into his mind, then eluded him. He went on in a lower tone. "Even if it's unconscious, he'll put political considerations ahead of anything else. His first efforts will be to keep himself in power. We're in a position to throw out political elements and concentrate on our immediate problem. To do that, we throw monkey's wrenches into the political gears and focus just on what we need. The things we need will come through." "Adroit, subtle, and capable of profound cunning," Flattery thought. "This Bickle bears the most careful watching." "Things we need," Timberlake said. "Such as what?" "Such as advice from certain specialists at the moon base, and as much computer time as they can spare us." "You can't separate the political from everything else," Flattery objected. "You'll only stir things up, and if you want to see what's in the bottom of the kettle, you'll have to give it one hell of a stir," Bickle said. "And I want them to define consciousness for us." He was way ahead of me again, Flattery thought. I have to stop underestimating him. One slip could ruin everything. Mm. Plans within plans within plans within plans. Chapter 8. Of all the Earthlings' crew, Rahalan Flattery has been provided with the most accurate information, suitably weighted, of course. This was necessary because he had to be provided with a secret terminal in his quarters through which he can monitor the mood of the ship and crew. A primary fuse has to be connected to the system, and Flattery is that fuse. Morgan Hempstead lectures at Moonbase. She had come into Com Central still feeling weak and disoriented. It was obvious that the shift of dominance had gone faster than expected, and she had forced herself to overcome her body's weaknesses, putting on a mask of well-being and composure that she did not feel. The ovoid Com Central room should not have confused her. She had put in too many hours of training among these dials and gauges and pipes and keyboard consoles before their departure, but the feeling of unfamiliarity persisted. Then, as awareness increased, she saw the subtle changes in connections and controls and readouts. Bickle's handiwork. He jury-rigged everything. All the changes were necessary to put the ship on manual, she realized, but she could feel the inadequacies of what had been done. It was only then that she realized the thin edge they walked, and she turned her attention to Flattery, who was finishing out his shift on the big board. The signs of strain were obvious in his movements, still exact with the surgeon's sureness, but the control betrayed his thinning energy in the way he relaxed abruptly after each adjustment of the board. He should be relieved now, she thought, but she knew she was not yet ready to have the green dial point down at her, and she was not sure of the conditions of Bickle and Timberlake. So interesting to put the ship on manual. So yeah, they're controlling every little system inside the ship with their power boards. Mm-mm-mm. The job of a OMC, an organic mental core. All right. We've been going for about 2 hours now. 10, 12. Okay, we're going to end this at 11 o'clock my time. Wherever we got to, we got to. We will continue reading from there next time. I don't think we're going to get through this today. We're up 45 of 280. So, yeah, not going to happen. Let's be reasonable. Let's be realistic. So, yeah, wherever we are at 11, we'll call it there. Maybe we can finish it tomorrow. I don't know. I don't know if we'll get through it all, but in the coming days, it shall be done for assuredly. For assuredly. So let's keep going. Let's get as far as we can. Timberlake radiated glum silence. Bickle had greeted her warmly enough. Glum silence, glum silence. There you go. Not gum silent. Timberlake radiated glum silence. There you go. Bickle had greeted her warmly enough, then handed her a load of programming. The task obviously pointed toward construction of an electronic multi-simulation model with their main computer's core memory input-output. Much of the programming remained to be completed. She lay back on her action couch, examined the test display of one series on the screen beside her. She felt the couch's enfolding cocoon through the vac suit. Wished there was time to let her body recover fully from its dehype ordeal. The evidence was all around her, though, that she had to get to work. There was no time for the luxury of slow recuperation. Okay, you're so proud of your position and title, Prudence Lon Weigand, MD, she told herself. You asked for this job. You know what you have to do. Get with it. The old self-lecture failed to rekindle her energies, and she steeled herself to hide all signs of weakness before speaking. Moonbase is taking longer to answer this time than it did before, she said. I gave him some questions to answer. They're too busy trying to decide what our reply really means, Bickle said. Or they could be figuring out how to tell us we've bitten off more than we can chew, Timberlake said. She heard fear in his voice. Raj has been on that board over 4 hours. Isn't it time somebody spelled him, Tim? Flattery knew what she was doing, but could not prevent the feeling of tension from gripping his spine. There was always the possibility Timberlake couldn't take this. Timberlake felt the dryness in his mouth. Naturally, she assumed he was giving orders here. He was the life systems man. She had not volunteered to take the board either. The bitch. But maybe it was too soon after DHAB. Metabolisms differed. She would know her own capacities, certainly. Besides, she was scheduled to follow Bickle on the board in the normal rotation. His glance followed the ComCentral track, the way the board circled around their positions. Bickle was in number one spot, then Prue, then Flattery, and he sat here on the end. It's my watch, Timberlake told himself. He felt perspiration start in his palms. Bickle had taken the board in his turn, obviously begrudging every minute away from his damned computations. He would not volunteer. Got to take that board, Timberlake told himself. He thought of more than 3,000 lives immediately depended on him when the green arrow slid over to his position. All the other lives and dreams that had been poured into this project. Every bit of it pointing a finger at him. I can't, he thought. He's taking too long, Flattery thought. I'll give you the board on the count, Tim. I'm wearing pretty thin. Before Timberlake could protest, the count had started, and his hand went automatically to the big red switch. Board and arrow came to him. Necessities of the job caught him immediately. Almost a third of the shield temperature control needed trimming to bring it into better balance. We should trace out the OMC linkages for this and install automatics for the gross part of the job, he thought. Presently, he fell into the routine of the watch. Here's our operating procedure, Bickle said. He looked up, got an exchange of knowing glances between Flattery and Prue, hesitated. Something going on between those two? If it was man-woman problems, that could cause trouble. You were saying, Prudence said. Bickle saw she was staring directly at him. Cleared his throat, glanced at his figures and schematics for reassurance. The computer must be the basis for anything we build, but we can't interfere with core memory and switching controls. That means we have to use an electronic simulation model, part of the AAT system. What about communication with Moonbase? Prudence asked. That's a stupid question, he thought, but he hid his irritation. A switching system will automatically restore AAT function when the reply burst hits our antennas. We'll use an alarm klaxon. Oh, she nodded, wondering how far she could go before he realized he was being irritated purposely. So she's asking questions that are going to make him annoyed. Is that something that helps stimulate his creativity? Potentially? Everything's going according to the script, it seems, you know? This will be an operational model, he said. It'll duplicate real characteristics of the total system, but won't function as completely as the computer based system. However, it will give us direct observation of the functions with conventional equipment. It'll tell us where we have to go unconventional. The environment, the signals, and the system parameters can be observed and changed as development progresses. And we'll only need a one way fused link with the computer to permit it to record all our results. This much was predictable, Flattery thought. But where does he go from here? Will generate an environment in scaled time and apply its own effect signals to the system under analysis, Prudence said. Good. What then? Based on my experience with the UMB experiments, Bickle answered, I can tell you which avenues aren't worth exploring and which avenues may give us an artificial consciousness. May do it. From here on in, it's cut and try. They're doing it, chat. They're freaking doing it. They're gonna make an artificial consciousness if it kills them, or it's gonna kill them. Or maybe this artificial consciousness will be the thing that kills them by itself as well. Um, Are we going to have to fight the time lag and possibility of transmission errors while we let Moonbase analyze our progress? Flattery asked. Pickle glanced at his computations and schematics, looked back at Prudence. Do we have a mathematician aboard competent enough to break down the embodied transducers of our results? Prudence looked across Pickle at the displays and stacks of schematics. She had followed enough of what he was doing there to combine that with the programming he had handed her. But it was the same old self reflexive circle every time they faced this problem. Where did the round of consciousness begin? Maybe I can handle the math, she said. And that's all, just maybe. Then which avenue do we explore first? Flattery asked. The field theory approach, Bickle said. Oh, great, Timberlake growled. We're going to assume that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Okay, Bickle said. But just because we can't see a thing or define it, that doesn't mean it isn't there and it shouldn't be added into the sum. We're going to be juggling one hell of a lot of unknowns. The best approach to that kind of job is the engineering one. If it works, that's the answer. Define consciousness for me, Prudence said. We'll leave that up to the big dome at UNB, Bickles said. And our only contact between the simulation model and the main computer will be through the loading channels. And our only contact between the simulation model and the main computer will be through the loading channels? Prudence asked. What do you do about the supervisory control programs? We're not going to touch the intercommunications lines to the computer, Bickle said. Our auxiliary will go into it through a one-way channel, fused against backlash. Then it won't give us total simulation, she pointed out. That's right, Bickle agreed. We'll have an error coefficient to contend with all along the line. We'll have an error coefficient to contend. Maybe I should have done this fresh. Nah, who cares? I mean, it's not that I don't care. It's just that we have to read. We have to read, chat. I've been putting this one off for too long. Mm-mm-mm. Mm-mm-mm. But yeah, I'm a little tired. Came from work and I decided we got to do this. We got to do this today. At least get it started. Doing a lot of gaming, not enough reading. Mm-mm-mm. And our only contact between the simulation model and the main computer will be through the loading channels? Prudence asked. What do we do about the supervisory control programs? We're not going to touch the inner communications lines to the computer, Bickle said. Our auxiliary will go into it through a one-way channel, fuse against backlash. Then it won't give us total simulation, she pointed out. That's right, Pickle agreed. We'll have an error coefficient to contend with all along the line. If it gets too high, we change our plan of attack. The simulator will be just an auxiliary, kind of a kind of dumb in some respects. And there's no way for this auxiliary to run wild? Flattery asked. It's a supervisory program. Its supervisory program will always be one of us, Pickle said, fighting to keep irritation from his voice. One of us will always be in the driver's seat. We'll drive it like we drive an ox pulling a wagon. This ox won't have any ideas of its own, eh? Flattery persisted. Not unless we solve the consciousness problem, Pickle said. Yeah. Flattery's words pounced. What? That's what NGAA. Yeah. Flattery's word pounced. And when it's conscious, what then? He asked. Pickle blinked at him, absorbing this. Presently, he said, I suppose it'll be like a newborn baby, in a sense. Created consciousness. What baby was ever born with all the information and stored experiences of this ship's master computer? Flattery demanded. Pickle's being fed this too fast, Prudence thought. If he's kept too much off balance, he may rebel or start to probe in the wrong places. He mustn't guess. Well, the human is born with instincts, Pickle said, and we do train the human baby into humanity. I find the moral and religious aspects of this whole idea faintly repugnant, Flattery declared flatly. I think there's sin here. If not hubris, then something equally evil. Prudence stared at him. Flattery betrayed signs of real agitation, a flush in his cheeks, fingers trembling, eyes bright and glaring. That wasn't in the program, she thought. Perhaps he's tired. All right, she said. We construct a field of interacting impulses, and that puts us right smack dab into a games theory problem, where countless bits are. Oh no, Bickle snapped. The UMB stab at this thing got all fouled up with games theory ideas like command constant and mobility constant and inner outer directed behavior. It took me one hell of a long time to realize they didn't know what they were talking about. Easy for you to say, Prudence said, holding her voice to a slow, cold beat. You forget, I saw the games machine they produced. The more it was used, the more it changed in. Okay, it changed, Bickle admitted. The machine absorbed part of its personality from its opponents. What's that? What's that mean? It had some of its characteristics of consciousness, sure, but it wasn't conscious. She turned away, conveying a sneer by the movement alone. He has to think he can rely on no one but himself. So no one else's ideas matter except for his. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to set him up. They're trying to, build him up. Only you can do it, King. Flattery shifted his attention from Bickle to Prudence and back. He found it increasingly difficult to hide his resentment of Bickle. Psychiatrist, heal thyself, he thought. Bickle has to take charge. I'm just a safety fuse. Flattery glanced at the false plates on his personal repeater board, thinking of the trigger beneath that plate and the mates to it in his quarters, concealed by the lines of the sacred graphic of the bulkhead. Arbitrary turned back command, Flattery reminded himself. That was the code signal he must listen for from UMB. That was the signal he must obey, unless he judged the ship had to be destroyed before release. Unless he judged the ship had to be destroyed before receiving that signal. Arbitrary turned back command. And then they get destroyed. The other guys turned around. Remember that last one? Number 5? They turned around and they exploded. They saw Tim in the wreckage. Timberlake. A simple push on one of the hidden triggers would activate the master program in the ship's computer, open airlocks, set off explosive charges, death and destruction for crew, ship, all the colonists and their supplies. Colonists and their supplies, Flattery thought. He was too good a psychiatrist not to recognize the guilt motives behind the careful provisioning of these ships. If you solve the artificial consciousness problem, you can plant a human colony somewhere in space. Not at Tau Ceti, of course, but. And he was too good a divine not to penetrate the religious hokum, not to see through the essential rightness of his role in the project. Given the known parallels, there had to be a safety fuse. There had to be someone willing and able to blow up the ship. Flattery knew the reasons. They were they were reality of the most brutal they were reality of the most brutal kind. The first crude attempts at mechanical reproduction of consciousness had been made on an island in the Puget Sound. The island no longer existed. Rogue consciousness, they had screamed. True enough, something had defied natural laws, slaughtered lab personnel, destroyed sensors, sent slashing beams of pure destruction through the surrounding countryside. Finally, it had taken the island. God knew where. Poof! No island, no lab personnel, nothing but gray water and a cold north wind whipping whitecaps across it, and the fish and the seaweed invading the area where the land and men and machinery had been. So they created artificial consciousness on this island, and then it was just gone in a flash. Which is really interesting because it's like, what does Frank Herbert think that artificial consciousness is capable of doing? Like it disappeared an entire island. What do you mean, Atlantis gone? How? It was Atlantis the whole time, chat. It was AI, AC, artificial consciousness. Because I mean, they're not talking about just intelligence, right? I mean, would you consider these AIs like grok conscious or just intelligence? You know, 'cause what is the difference? Let's look this up. The implications, chat. The implications. Let's see if there is actually designations between consciousness and intelligence. Um, Artificial intelligence focuses on creating systems that can perform tasks. Artificial consciousness aims to create systems that not only perform intelligent tasks but also possess subjective experiences and self-awareness akin to human consciousness. In essence, AI is about mimicking cognitive functions while AC strives to replicate the more elusive qualities of the subjective experience. So yeah, it's definitely deeper, much deeper than just an AI. Which is why are these things so godly in Frank Herbert's writings? You know, like why does this thing have the ability to destroy an entire or poof away an entire island? Very interesting. I don't think we ever get a reason as to why they're able to. Because I mean, what could it? This is a spaceship. What? How? Okay, well, unless it was just an explosion, unless it just exploded, but there was nothing left. Chat. There was nothing left. The island is gone. So it was teleported. It didn't just explode. It just vanished. How? How? What? What is it that these artificial consciousnesses have that allows them to do these amazing feats? Colonists and their supplies, Flattery thought. He was too good a psychiatrist not to recognize the guilt motives behind the careful provisioning of the ship. If you solve the artificial consciousness problem, you can plant a human colony somewhere in space. Not at Tau Ceti, of course, because that was a lie. Tau Ceti, there is no habitable planet there. But, and he was too good a divine not to penetrate the religious hokum, not to see through the essential rightness of his role in the project. Given the known perils, there had to be a safety fuse. There had to be someone willing and able to blow up the ship. Flattery knew the reasons. They were a reality of the most brutal kind. The first crude attempts at mechanical reproduction of consciousness had been made on an island in the Puget Sea. The island no longer existed. Rogue consciousness, they had screamed. True enough, something had defied natural laws, slaughtered lab personnel, destroyed sensors, sent slashing beams of pure destruction through the surrounding countryside. Finally, it had taken the island. God knew where. Poof! No island, no lab personnel, nothing but gray water and a cold north wind whipping whitecaps across it, and the fish and the seaweed invading the area where land and men and machinery had been. Just thinking about it made Flattery shiver. He conjured up in his mind the image of the sacred graphic from his quarters, absorbed some of the peace from the field of serenity, the tranquility of the holy faces. Even Moonbase didn't walk too close to this project now. It was all a sham to educate ship personnel, to frustrate the eager young men and women. Each project chip must maintain its coefficient of frustration, went the private admonition. Frustration must come from both human and mechanical sources. They thought of frustration as a threshold, a factor to heighten awareness. It made a weird kind of sense. Thus, there were crew members like Flattery and Prudence, Lon Wagand, and machinery that broke down, robots repair units that had to have a human monitor every second, and programmed emergencies to complicate real emergencies. On all of this, it's even more interesting because they're doing all of this to prod Bickle into making this consciousness. It seems like they wanted him to make this consciousness the entire time, right? Because this was option number 3. They were like, well, you could do this or you could do this, or maybe if you guys created consciousness on your own. So the OMCs were designated to destroy themselves, or designed to destroy themselves at some point, so that they could force this situation where Pickle has to use his big brainy brain to come up with a solution for artificial consciousness. Okay. Chapter 9. The universe is derived from an ultimate principle of spiritual consciousness, the one and only existent from eternity. Accepting this, you become an affirmer of the void, which is to be understood as a primordial nothingness. That is, the raw stuff out of which all is created, as well as the background against which every creation can be discerned. The education of a Chaplain psychiatrist from the Moon based documents. It had been a tiring watch, and Flattery longed to return to his quarters. He wanted to bathe himself in the field generated there, to examine the mood of the computer complex. That was one of his prime duties, to be certain that the computer had settled back into pure mechanism after being deprived of its last organic mental core. There was always the off chance that one of these attempts might achieve success by accidents. But there was no way he could leave early without arousing the wrong kinds of suspicions. Well, there was another duty for the psychiatrist Champlain to perform. He looked at Bickle. Can't monitor every nuance of your machine's behavior, Battery said. You can't be certain of every way its circuits may interact. Yeah, Bickle said. Adding all parts doesn't give you the sum you want or need. So why wouldn't those numbskulls at the UMB build their circuits around egg multipliers? Answer me that. Timberlake glanced at Flattery, thoughts. Go ahead. Get Pickle started on that subject. He's Johnny one note on that one. There was some mention back at UMB, Flattery said, that you were trying to get them to use. Trying, Pickle snarled. I practically got down on my knees and begged. They acted like I was a moron. Kept saying computers only add, even when they're multiplying. It's only theory's addition. They kept this up until I. You've offered no logical circuit changes, Flattery said. That's the way I heard it. Because I didn't get the chance, Pickle said. Look, the Ang multiplier is a solid state and small enough to fit into any of our miniaturization requirements. It works something like a cathode follower, so the circuit requirements aren't too weird for us to follow. It's essentially a multiplier. Depending on the circuitry, it'll take several potentials of linear, semi-linear, or even non-linear circuits, and it'll yield a potential which is a product of the inputs. It multiplies them. But what's more important, when you reverse the circuitry, you get a device that taps the circuit, divides it, mind you, at a point which varies with the load. It works like a nerve cell. The UMB team must have had good reasons not to take you up on this, Prudence said. If they said I hadn't proved this was an analog of organic function, Pickle sneered. Hadn't proved it. Key rice. They wouldn't even spare me computer time to work out test circuitry. Everything was tied up trying to define consciousness. You buy their definitions, don't you? Flattery asked. If I did, I wouldn't have asked them to define it again, Pickle snorted. I've had about all the label juggling I can stomach. Consciousness is pure awareness, they said. Then what about the objects of consciousness, I asked. Disregard them, they say. It's pure awareness. What's awareness without an object to focus on, I asked. Not important, they say. It's pure awareness. Then they turn right around and say, this pure awareness is a pattern of 3 primary forces. What are these 3 primary forces? An I entity plus the organism of this entity plus everything external which could act as a stimulus plus objects. But that's not it, they say. This merely means pure awareness juggles three factors, and it's a senseless complication to try to to multiply them two and two when you could add them and follow the circuits in much more direct fashion. You're oversimplifying the argument, Prudence said. All right, I'm oversimplifying, but those are the essentials. And you had a ready answer, of course? And you had a ready answer, of course, she said. I've already told you I couldn't beg, borrow, or steal any computer time. But you insist you can prove your. Look, Bickle said. They told me I couldn't prove an organic analog, but I know I can. You just know it, she said. You can't find words to quite. When you've worked with as many thought put instruments and computer designs as I have, he said, you get a feeling for function. There are times when you can look at a design of a circuit and you know immediately how it's supposed to function. You don't need the manufacturer's specifications. Do I understand you correctly? Flattery asked. You're referring to God as a manufacturer. If that's. Go ahead, Bickle snapped. Look at the design of the human cerebellum. Don't try to fight with me over who designed it. Just look at it. You're a doctor. What's it suggest to you? What does it suggest to you? Flattery countered. That some potential effect is mediated there, Bickle said. This is a balancing system, very like our vestibular reflex that keeps us from falling on our asses when we walk on our knees. Very like the vestibular reflex that keeps us from falling on our asses while we walk. But the cerebellum also has a terminus, Prudence said. Cerebral output to the cerebellum doesn't even stop when you're asleep, Flattery said. How can you. So the cerebellum soaks up energy like an infinite sponge, Bickle said. Energy is always pouring into it. Emotional, sensory, motor, and mental energy. Why do we blandly assume that cerebellum engages in no activity? You can't find that anywhere else in nature or in devices made by man, where a system as complicated as this just sits there and does nothing. You're arguing that the cerebellum is the seat of consciousness? Flattery asked. And you haven't defined consciousness, Prudence said. She kept her attention fixed on Bickle, hiding her excitement. His argument wasn't new, but she sensed he had a clearer understanding of where he was going with it than ever before. Seat of consciousness. No, I'm arguing that the cerebellum could mediate consciousness, integrate it, balance it, and that consciousness is a field phenomenon growing out of three or more lines of energy. We are more than our ideas. Prue's right, Flattery said. You're not defining it. He glanced at Prudence, aware of her excitement and resenting it. Knowing the source of his resentment gave little solace. But I can come at it through the back door, Bickle said. What, it's not? Prudence asked. Right, Bickle said. It's not introspection, not sensing, feeling, or thinking. These are all physiological functions. Machines can do all these things and still not be conscious. What we're hunting is the third order phenomenon of relationship, not a thing. It's not synonymous with awareness. It's neither subjective nor objective. It's a relationship. We're more than our ideas, Prudence said. There's the answer to the UMB's glorified adding machines, Bickle said. It's what I kept telling them about this undefined human consciousness. When you add the inputs as a series in time, you don't always get an answer corresponding to the outputs. And since it is an addition, it has to be more sophisticated. It has to be a more sophisticated mathematical problem. Timberlake, listening to Bickle, could feel the fitness intuitively. Bickle was going in the right direction, even though the landscape around them was fuzzy. We're more than our ideas. Prudence leaned back, weighing Bickle's words. He had to be given free rein. That was the directive, but he also had to feel he was being obstructive. Sensing that she had let herself get too close to the problem, she forced anger into her voice. Damn it to hell, you still haven't defined it. We may never define it, Bickle said, but that doesn't mean we can't reproduce it. You want to start mocking up a prototype to test your theories? Flattery asked. Using our communications AAT system as a basis, Bickle said. The AAT is linked directly to the computer core, Flattery said. It's part of the translation master program. If you make a mistake, you destroy the heart of the computer. I'm not sure we should. It'll be securely fused, Bickle said. No chance of backlash getting through to. Without the computer, our automatics cease functioning, Timberlake said. Maybe we'd better reconsider if. Come off that, Tim, Bickle protested. You could set up the safety system as well as I could. There's not a chance of anything getting through to the. I keep thinking of the UMB's so-called thinking machine, Timberlake said. We can't see all their behavior. If we miss one linkage, we could upset a vital master program. We're just not going to miss any linkages. The schematics are all available. This isn't flying blind. The AAT is the only thing we could really foul up. And this distance from Moonbase, it's of dubious value. Does he want to cut us off from the UMB? The Moonbase. Maybe maybe Bickle doesn't want the UMB to interfere with whatever he has coming up next. His next plan within plans within plans. If you demolish the AAT system, Flattery said, how long would it take to restore communications? 15 to 20 hours, Bickle said. We could have a jury rig doing the job by then. A jury rig. We could have a jury rig doing the job by then, so they would, patch into the system in another way and be able to like do their messages and put it like just like what they're doing now with all the other core systems. Flattery looked questioningly at Timberlake. That's about right, Timberlake agreed. We use the AAT as a basis for our simulator, Bickle said. So the AAT is also something important. This is also something that the UMB, the moon base, put in Bickle's way for him to use to overcome this problem. The perfect thing that he needs to make his simulation interesting. We use the AAT as a basis for our simulator, Bickle said. We'll raid colony stores for reels of neuron fiber, Eng multipliers, and the other basic components. What we have to get is a system that simulates human nerve net function. They're making human nerve nets like neurons, but they're using this machinery to do it. Eng multipliers, neuron fiber. But will it be conscious? Flattery asked. All we can do is cut it. All we can do is cut and try, Bickle said. Our computer and even the AAT work on analog additive product. Our computer and even the AAT work on analog additive principles. We're going to build a system that's strictly infinite multiplying. Our system will produce message units that are products of many multipliers. You make it sound so simple, Prudence said. Connect net A to net B at points D and D prime, and you get the consciousness factor, CF for short. Bickle's lips thinned. You have a better plan? Did I push too hard? She wondered, and she spoke quickly. Oh, I'm with you, Bickle. You obviously know all the answers. I don't know all the answers, Bickle growled, but I'm not going to sit out here moaning about fate, and I'm not turning back. That's why Moonbase had to say that. You could come back. No, Bickle says, no, hell no. We're solving this problem, and we're solving it now. What if we have to turn back? Flattery wondered. What do we do about Bickle's inhibition then? Are you going to wait for Moonbase to answer? Flattery asked. Bickle glanced at Prudence. I'd prefer starting at once, but that means I'd miss my shift on the board. And since I'll need Tim, we can handle it, Flattery said. Everything seems to be running smoothly. Prudence looked up at the big board and the inactive repeaters over her couch, wondering at her sudden feeling of chill. I'm afraid to take that board, she thought. All of them think the same thing. Except for Bickle. Bickle just went and did it all on his own. Those thousands of lives down in the hype tanks, all depending on the first time reactions. Did the UMB big domes really know what they were doing when they sent us out here? Was this the only way? Should we dehype more people to help us out? But that would overload several systems, including the Bickle system. So Bickle can't have too many people around. Or he short circuits. Chapter 10. The chase has fascinated humankind from the beginning, and with good reason. What many failed to understand, however, was that there could be the excitement of the chase even where the only thing you were chasing was an idea, a concept, a theory. As awareness developed, it became apparent that this was the most important chase of all, the one upon whose outcome all of humankind survives or fails. Rahalan Flattery. The Book of Ship. The Book of Ship! They say it again. What is this? I might have an idea, chat, but we're not going to tell you. The creaking of their action couches, the click-clack of relays, all of the subtle and familiar sounds of Com Central, worried at the edges of Prudence's awareness. For the past half hour, Bickle had been fussing through the schematics, plotting his way into the computer, sharing parts of his plan with the others. She had come to dislike the sound of the schematics being shuffled. There were tensions here that she did not fully understand, But her own role remained clear: mediate and goad. Mediate and gold. The common stench of Com Central carried acridity and an acridity which she identified as fear. We have a chance at glory, she told herself. Very few people ever have that opportunity. It was an empty pep talk, forever confronted by that inescapable fear. I am not people. They're property, remember? Clones. So she knows too, which is really interesting. I thought, well, in my memories, I was only Flattery who knew that they were clones, but I've also read the following books, so blah blah blah. No spoilers. I didn't remember that Prudence knew, because Timberlake obviously has no clue what the hell is happening here, but Prue, she has an idea. She has more than an idea, it seems, because she's thinking about the Bickle system the entire time. For the first time since coming out of the hype tank, she felt the old familiar pain of wonder, asking herself what it might have been like to have been born into a normal family in the normal way, to have grown up in the noisy, intimate belonging of the unchosen. She should become a hell diver because oh wait, the hell divers are property too. No, actually, I'm wrong. Property of Super Earth. You are the cream, the select few. Morgan Hempstead and his cohorts had kept reminding them. They all knew where the cream had originated. Normal biopsy tissue from a living human volunteer had been suspended in an axolotl tank. The genetic imprint triggered and the flesh allowed to grow. It produced an identical twin, an expendable twin. Select few, she thought. Something precious was taken from us, and the compensations were inadequate. She tuned the small screen at the corner of her board to one of the tail eyes, looked back towards the center of the solar system, toward the planet that had spawned them. A stabbing pang of homesickness tightened her breast, made breathing difficult for a moment. They had been molded and motivated, twisted, trained, and inhibited, wound up like mechanical toys, and sent scooting off into the darkness with their laser whistle tooting to let the UMB know where they were. And what are we? She asked herself as she blanked at the screen. Pure, you'd better take the big board. Prue, you'd better take the big board, Flattery said. You'd normally follow John. Sight of the big board's dials and gauges filled her with an abrupt anger and fear. She felt the immediacy of the emotions in a dry throat, heat in her cheeks. I haven't had enough time off the board to recuperate, Flattery said, speaking hesitantly. Or I'd. All right, she said. I'll take it. All right, she said. I'll take it. She took a deep breath, leaned back. Signed to Timberlake to begin the count. The appeal to her nursing instinct did it, Flattery thought. She was ready to funk out. She had to take the board now or she might never be able to face it. Yep. It's so interesting that they're using all this psychiatry, like psychology, like on each other, you know. Flattery glanced at Timberlake, saw the relief so apparent on the man's face as he switched the green arrow to Prudence. Timberlake, dominated by intuition, was terrified by the responsibility of Com Central. Prudence, deep in sensation, shared that fear. And I, because I feel their fear, overcome my own repugnance, Flattery thought. Only Bickle, logical and with penetrating intelligence, seemed immune to these pressures. It was a flaw in Bickle's character, Flattery thought, but he knew their lives could depend on that flaw. Get the manifest and shiploading plans, Tim, Bickle said. I'll give you a list of what we need from the colony stores. We can set up in the computer maintenance shop next door for easy. Don't stay outside the shielding area too long, Prudence said. You better key your dosimeters to repeaters in here. You better key your dosimeters to repeaters in here. We'll keep an eye on you that way. Right, Bickle said. Dosimeters. Dosimeters are devices used to measure and record the amount of radiation exposure in an individual or an object receives. Interesting. So they'll relay all of their radiation levels back to command comm central here. He slipped off his couch, looked back at Prudence, studying her profile. The intent way she watched the big board, he shifted his attention to Flattery, who lay back with eyes closed, resting for his shift at the controls. Then to Timberlake, who was taking copies of the ship loading plans from the computer memory bank printers. None of them has really focused on what has to be done here, Bickle thought. They haven't faced the fact that the simulator eventually has to be tied directly to the computer. We'll just be building a set of frontal lobes if we're successful, and our ox can have but one source of experience upon which to come alive. And our ox can have but one source of experience upon which to come alive and conscious: the computer and its memory banks. When they did face this fact, Bickles saw he was going to have to fight on his hands. Too much of the ship was almost totally dependent on the master programs. Juggling those programs involved a kind of all or nothing danger. It was a flaw in the Tin Egg's design, Bickle felt. He could see no logical reason for it. Why should everything on the ship depend on conscious control or intervention, even down to the robot's repair units? Because they need because it needs to be all powerful, all so you can control all the functionings on this ship. The ship itself becomes your body, right? If you're the OMC, organic mental core. It's a hybrid mechanical being, more or less. Interesting. Prudence sensed Bickle's attention on her, saw his face reflected in the gauge plastic cover. His questionings, doubts, and determination were all there for her to read, just as surely as she read the dial beneath the plastic reflector. She had set him up. She had done that part of her job as well as could be expected, she thought. She focused now on the total console, feeling the sensory pulses of the ship reaching outward to the hull skin and beyond. Job routine was beginning to smooth off the harsh edges of her fear. She took a deep breath, keyed a forward exterior sensor to the overhead screen, studied the star spangled view of what lay ahead of the tin egg. That's our prize, she thought, looking at the stars. First, we clean out the Augean stables, then we get to be first, out there. The candy and the stick. That's that's the candy, a virgin world of our own. And we have our own tanks full of colonists to prove prove Earth's good faith. And I am the stick. She's the one beating Bickle so that he can go and grab his candy out there. The screen view appeared suddenly repulsive to her, and she blanked it, returned her attention to the big board and its pressures. It's the uncertainty that gets to us, she thought. There's too much unknown out here. Something has to go wrong. But we don't know what it'll be or when it'll hit. We only know the blow when it falls can be totally destructive, leaving not a trace. It has been before. 6 times. She heard Bickle and Timberlake leave, and the hiss of the hatch expanders sealing behind them. She turned and looked at Flattery. He had a small blue smudge stain on his cheek just below his left eye. The stain appeared suddenly as an enormous flaw in the otherwise perfect creature. It terrified her, and she turned back to the big board to hide her emotion. Why? Why did the other 6 fail? She asked. You must have faith, Flattery said. One ship will make it, one day. Perhaps it'll be our ship. Seems such a wasteful way, she murmured. Very little's wasted. Solar energy's cheap at Moon Base. Raw materials are plentiful. But we're alive, she protested. There are plenty more where we came from. They'll be almost precisely like us. And all of them God's children. His eye is ever on us. We should. Oh, stop that. I know why we have a Champlain to feed us all that pap when we need it. I don't need it, and I never will. How proud we are, Flattery said. You know what you can do with your metaphysical crap. There is no God, only. Shut up, he barked. I speak as your Champlain. I'm surprised at your stupidity. The temerity in your that permits you to utter such blasphemy out here. Oh yes, she sneered. I forgot. You're also our wily Indian scout sniffing the unknown ter- You're also our wily Indian scout sniffing the unknown terrain in front of you. That's wild. Freaking Frank Herbert. You're also our wily Indian scout sniffing the unknown terrain in front of us. You're the hedge on our bets. The what if factor. The You have no idea how much unknown we face, he said. Right out of Hamlet, she mocked him and allowed her voice to go heavy with portentousness. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. He felt an abrupt pang of fear for her. I'll pray for you, Prudence. And he cursed inwardly at the sound of his own voice. He had come through as a fatuous ass, but I will pray for her, he asked. Fatuous. Silly and pointless. Fatuous. The fatuous. It's like a sea chant. He felt an abrupt pang of fear for her. I'll pray for you, Prudence. And he cursed inwardly at the sound of his own voice. He had come through as a fatuous ass, but I will pray for her, he thought. Prudence turned back to the big board, reminding herself, a stick is to beat people with, to goad them beyond themselves. Raj can't just be a Champlain. He has to be a super Champlain. Flattery took a deep, quavering breath. Her blasphemy had touched his most profound doubts, and he thought how little anyone suspected what lay beneath their veneer of science, deep in that Pandora's box where anything was possible. Anything? He asked himself. That was the bind, of course. They were penetrating the frontiers of anything, and anything had always been before the prerogative of God. And anything had always before been the prerogative of God. So they're entering the realm of the gods. They're doing things that maybe they should not be doing. Okay, we're going to go one more chapter. I see that we're right there, 11 right now. We're going to finish chapter 11, and then we'll begin again with chapter 12 next time. Sounds like a plan. All right, let's get to it. Let's get it done for today. Chapter 11. Symbolic behavior of some order has to be requisite of consciousness. Symbolic behavior of some order has to be a requisite of consciousness. And it must be noted that symbols abstract. They reduce a message to selected form. Morgan Hempstead lectures at Moonbase. So if it's something is conscious, it has to be capable of symbolic behavior. Hmm. Spread out that software on the bench, Tim, Bickle directed. Start out by putting the pertinent parts of the loading plan on top what we need will be in the robot. Wait. No, the web page just did a weird jump. Spread out that software on the bench, Tim, Bickle directed. Start by putting the pertinent parts of the loading plan on top. What we need will be in the robot stores. I'll be with you in a minute. Timberlake looked at Bickle's back. Control had passed so obviously into the man's hands. No one questioned it now. He shrugged, began laying out the manifests and loading plans. Bickle glanced around the room. The computer maintenance shop was designed in such a way that CompCentral nested partly into the curve of one wall. The shop presented one flat wall opposite CompCentral, a wall about 4.5 meters high and 10 meters long. Its face covered with plug boards, comparators, simultaneous multiplexers, buffer system, monitors, diagnostic instruments, dials, and telltales. Behind that wall's hardware and shields lay the first banks of master program routing that led down the core memory sections of the vast library of routines that marked out the limits of the equipment. we'll have to block sort the systems to find all the audio and visual links and the AAT bands, Pickle said. It's going to be a bootstrap operation all the way, and the only information going back into the system will have to come from us. That means one of us will have to monitor the readout at all times. We'll have to sort out the garbage as we go and keep a running check on every control sequence we use. Let's start with the gate circuit system right here. Pickle indicated an optical character reader on the wall directly in front of him. It was all clear to him, the entrance into into the problem. If only he could keep the gate of his own awareness open, one step at a time. But there remained the weight of those 6 previous failures, reasons unknown. More than 18,000 people lost. They don't think of us as real people, Pickle told himself. We're expendable, components, easily replaced. What happened with the other 6 ships? He wiped perspiration from his hands. The conference hookups with this the conference hookups with station personnel had served only to frustrate him. He remembered sitting at his pickup desk, staring to the vid-eye screen across his ink-stained blotter, watching the movements of faces in the screen divisions, faces he only knew in an untouchable second-hand way. The memory was dominated by Hempstead's voice, issuing from that hard wide mouth with my god, I'm so tired. We got this, chat. Okay. First we shake the sleepiness out and we get through this last chapter. Come on, chat. We'll come at it nice and fresh next time. Okay. The conference hookups with the station personnel had served only to frustrate him. He remembered sitting at his pickup desk, staring into the vid-eye screen across his ink-stained blotter, watching the movement of faces in the screen divisions, faces he only knew in an untouchable second-hand way. The memory was dominated by Hempstead's voice, issuing from that harsh, wide mouth with its even rows of teeth. Any theory introduced to explain the loss of those ships must remain a theory at present. In the final analysis, we must admit we simply do not know what happened. We can only guess. Guesses. System failure, mechanical failure, human failure, all subdivisions within subdivisions to break down the rows of guesses. But never a word of suspicion about the organic mental cores. Not one hint or theory or guess. The brains were perfect. But they're not. Why? Bickle muttered, staring at the gauges of the computer panel. The stacked schematics on the bench rustled as Timberlake looked up. What? Why didn't they suspect OMC failure? Bickle asked. Stupid mistake? That's too pat, Bickle protested. There's some overriding reason what we weren't given all the facts. He approached the computer panel, wiped away a small, smudged fingerprint. What are you getting at? Timberlake asked. Think how easy it was to keep a secret from us. Everything we did or said or breathed or ate was under their absolute control. We're the orbiting orphans, remember? Sterile isolation. The story of our lives. Sterile isolation. Physical and mental. That's not reasonable, Timberlake said. There are good reasons for sterile isolation. Big advantages in a germ-free ship. But if you keep information from people who need it, well, that's not even optimum. Don't you ever get tired of being manipulated? Bickle asked. They wouldn't they? But what do we really know about the Tau Ceti project? Bickle asked. Only what we've been told. Automatic probes were sent out. They say they found this one habitable planet circling Tau Ceti, so UMB began sending ships. Well, why not? Timberlake asked. Lots of reasons why not. You're too damn suspicious. Sure I am. They'll tell us that because of the dangers, they'll only send duplicate humans. Doppelgangers. It makes sense, Timberlake said. You don't see anything suspicious in this setup? Hell no. I see. Bickle turned away from this glistening face on the computer panel, scowled at Timberlake. Then let's try another tack. Don't you find it at all difficult to focus on this problem of consciousness? On what? We have to make an artificial consciousness, Bickle said. That's our main chance. Project knows it. So do we. Do you find it difficult to face this problem? What problem? You don't think it'll be much of a problem manufacturing an artificial consciousness? Well, your life depends on solving it, Bickle said. I guess so. You guess so? Do you have an alternative plan? We could turn back. See, everyone else says, oh, well, we could turn back. But if they turn back, the flattery has been designated to kill them. So Bickle's the only one with an actual solution. life depends on solving it. Bickle fought down a surge of anger. None of you see it. See what? The 10 eggs almost totally dependent on computer function. The AAT system uses computer translation banks. All our ship's sensors are sorted through the computer for priority of presentation on Com Central screens. Every living soul in the hype tanks has an individual life system program through the computer. The drive is computer governed. The crew life system, the shields, the failsafe circuits, hull integrity, the radiation reflectors, because everything was supposed to be left under the control of an OMC. And if the OMCs were designed to fail, they always intended for Bickle to create a new OMC, right? Right? That's the plan. So the last 6 ships failed because Bickle wasn't able to create an OMC, right? Right. And it was always a Bickle clone. It was always a Bickle clone. What if on some of those past ships though? What if on some of those past ships the Bickle clone was the one to die instead of Amida? That's also an interesting implication as well. Yeah, we'll never know, but we will never know, just like Bickle is saying. Yeah. Because everything was supposed to be left under the control of an OMC. Bickle crossed the shop in one low gravity step, slapped a hand onto the papers on the bench. The movement sent several papers fluttering to the deck, but he ignored them. And all the brains on 7 ships failed. I can feel it right in my guts. The OMCs failed, and we weren't given one word of warning. Timberlake started to speak, thought better of it. He bent, collected the schematics from the deck, replaced them on the bench. Something about the force of Bickle's words, some product of vehemence, prevented arguments. He's right, Timberlake thought. Timberlake looked up at Bickle, noting the perspiration on the man's forehead, the frown lines at the corners of his eyes. We still could turn back, Timberlake said. Your life depends on it, Timberlake. There is no turning back. I don't think we can. This is a one-way trip. Why not? If we headed back and had a computer malfunction, we'd still be headed home. You call diving into the sun home? Timberlake wet his lips with his tongue. They used to teach kids to swim by tossing them into a lake, Bickle said. Well, we've been tossed into the lake. We'd better start swimming. For sure as hell we're going to sink. Project wouldn't do that to us. Oh, he whispered it. Project wouldn't do that to us, Timberlake whispered. Oh, wouldn't they? But 6 ships. More than 18,000 people. People? What people? The only losses I know about are gangers, fairly easy to replace. Gangers, doppelgangers. If you have a cheap energy source. We're people, Timberlake said. Not just doppelgangers. To us, we're people, Bickle said. Now I have a real honey of a question for you, considering all those previous ship failures and the numerous possibilities of malfunction. Why didn't Project give us a code for talking about failure of OMCs, ours, or any others? These suspicions are crazy, Timberlake said. Yeah, Bickle said. We're really on our way to Tau Ceti. Our lives are totally dependent on an all-or-nothing computer system, quite by the merest oversight. We've aimed ships like ours all over the sky, at Dub, at Shedar, at Hamal, at... There was always the off chance that those other 6 ships made it. You know that. They disappeared, sure, but... now we've got to the meat. Maybe they weren't failures, eh? Maybe they... It wouldn't make sense to send 2 seeding ships to the same destination, Timberlake pointed out. Not if you weren't sure what was happening to... You really believe that, Tim? Well, I have a better suggestion, Tim. If some crazy bastard tossed you into a lake when you couldn't swim, and you learned to swim like that, Bickle snapped his fingers, and you found then you could just keep on going, wouldn't you swim like hell to get away from the crazy bastard? Wow, we got to some good stuff. We got to some good stuff, chat. Yeah, this next chapter too long. We're not gonna go for it. Just kidding. We can do it. Chapter 11. Right now we're in chapter 12. I mean chapter 10. Here we go. Here we go. Chapter 10. Yeah. We're chapter 12. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm so dumb. Chapter 12. Demand. Defying God. OMC. So this is they're talking to the organic mental cores. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Demand. How can God contain the universe? OMC. Study the hologram. The individual is both laser and target. A hologram. Study the hologram. The individual is both laser and target. Fragment from message capsule number 4, thought to have originated with flattery, number 4B model. So this is the fourth ship. Interesting. In Com Central, the sounds were those the umbilicus crew had come to accept as normal. The creak of action couches and their gimbals, the click of an occasional relay as it called attention to the telltale on the big board. Has Bickle unburdened himself at all about the artificial consciousness project back at UMB? Prudence asked. She removed her attention momentarily from the master console, glanced at Flattery, her sole companion on the lonely watch. Flattery appeared a bit pale, his mouth drawn downward in a frown. She returned her attention to the console, noting on the time log that her ship watch had little more than an hour yet to run. The strain was beginning to drag at her energy reserves. Flattery was taking a hell of a long time to answer, she thought, but he was famous for the ponderous reply. He said a little, Flattery said, and he glanced at the hatch to the computer maintenance shop where Bickle and Timberlake were working. Prue, shouldn't we be listening in on them, making sure they... Not yet, she said. They wouldn't have to know we were listening. You underestimate Bickle, she said. That's about the worst mistake you can make. He's fully capable of throwing a trace meter onto the communications, as I have, just on the off chance something interesting will turn up, like finding us listening. Do you think he's started building? Mostly preparation at this stage, she said. They're collecting material. You can pretty well follow their movements by watching the power drain here on the board. The shifts in temperature sensors and their dosimeter repeaters, and the drain on the Roblox cargo handlers. They've been out into the cargo sections. One of them has. Probably Tim. You know what Bickle said about the UMB attempt? Flattery asked. He paused to scratch an itch under his chin. Said the biggest failure was in attention. The experts wandering away, doing everything but keeping their attention on the main line. That's a little too warm for comfort, she said. He may suspect, Flattery said, but he can't be certain. There you go, underestimating him again. He's already solved it. He's already figured it all out, chat. He already knows. And over here, Flattery's still like, oh, poor little Bickle. If only he knew. If only he knew these things. And he knows. And Prue knows that he knows. Seems Prue knows him better, right? I guess they went to school together, so probably spent more time with Prue, yeah. Well, at least he's going to need our help, Flattery said, and we'll be able to tell what's going on from how he needs us. Are you sure he needs us? We'll have to use you for his deeper math analysis, Flattery said. And me, well, he's going to be plowing through the von Neumann problem before he gets much beyond the first steps. He may not have faced that yet, but he'll have to when he realizes he has to get deterministic results from unreliable hardware. She turned to stare at him, noting the faraway look in his eyes. How's that again? He has to build with non living matter, and he's building a living consciousness. So what? She returned her attention to the board. Nature makes so what? She returned her attention to the board. Nature makes do with the same stuff. Living systems aren't living below the molecular level. And you underestimate life, Flattery said. The basic elements Bickle has to use are from our robot stores, reels of quasi biological neurons and solid state devices, Nerix wires, and things like that. All of it non living at a stage far above the molecular. But their fine structure is as relevant to their function as any living matter is. Perhaps you're beginning to see the essential hubris in even approaching this problem, Flattery said. Oh, come off that, Champlain. We're not back in the 18th century making Vaucanson's wonderful duck. We're tackling something much more complex than primitive automata, but our intention is the same as Vaucanson's. That's absolutely not true, Prudence said. If we succeeded and took our machine back to the Vaucanson's time and showed it to him, he'd just marvel at our mechanical ability. You missed the mark. Poor Valconson would run for the nearest priest and volunteer for the lynch mob to do away with us. You see, he never intended to make anything that was really alive. It's only a matter of degree, not basic difference, she protested. He was like Aladdin rubbing the lamp compared to us, Flattery said. And even if his intentions were the same as ours, he wasn't aware of it. You're talking in circles. Am I really? This is the thing that writers and philosophers have skirted for centuries with their eyes half averted. This is the monsters out of folklore, Prue. This is Frankenstein's poor monster and the sorcerer's apprentice. This is the idea of building a conscious robot. The very idea of building a conscious robot can be faced only if we recognize the implicit danger that we may be building a golem that'll destroy us. So, for sure, the last attempt got destroyed. But yes, what if some of these ships actually succeeded in creating consciousness and they became godlike golems that are capable of destroying us? Interesting. But yeah, we did see Tim's freeze-dried face in the wreckage of that last ship. It got blown up by lasers. They fired lasers at it. In your off hours, you tell ghost stories. Laughter's as good a way as any of facing this fear, he said. You're really serious, she accused. Never more serious. Why'd you suppose Project's so happy to send us far out into space to do our work? She tried to swallow in a dry throat. Realized she was afraid. I'm glad we read this chapter, chat. This is a good place to leave it. This is a big lore dump here. Why'd you suppose Project's so happy to send us far out into space to do our work? She tried to swallow in a dry throat, realized she was afraid. Flattery had touched a nerve. He had produced a powerful truth from somewhere. She forced herself to face this as a fact when she felt an urge to call the computer shop and beg Bickle and Tim to stop whatever they were doing. The urge sent a chill along her spine. But the other option is death. They either accomplish the mission or they die. Where do we draw the line between what's living and what's inanimate? Flattery asked. He studied her, seeing the fatigued shadows under her eyes, the trembling of a nerve at her temple. Will our creature be alive? Cleared her throat. Wouldn't it be more to the point to ask if our creature would be able to reproduce itself? If there's any danger, any real danger to, then indeed we may be on forbidden ground, and he wondered why this thought always brought such an empty feeling in the pit of his stomach. Oh, for God's sake, Raj, Prudence was vehement. Have you completely forgotten that you're a scientist? For God's sake, I can never forget it, he said quietly. Stop that! She realized her voice unconsciously had assumed the preemptory tone of her dormitory mother back in the UMB creche. Dormitory mother, a gray-haired image whose touch was never more than a padded flexor of a robot, which he directed from some remote sanctuary in Project Central. Such a sad woman she'd been, so cynical and remote. Religion makes demands that can't be denied unless you're willing to pay a terrible price, Flattery said. Like jihad. This is Dune. You can see a lot of like Frank Herbert, like the stuff that happens in Dune, like in these other earlier works and stuff like that. Feints within fates, thinking machines, this and that. It's really, really interesting. Really, really interesting. Religion. So basically, in Frank Herbert's Dune, he unleashes jihad upon the universe, galaxy, which he's unable to do because it's already it has its own legs. Like it's moving on its own momentum, and even his own death wouldn't end end all the senseless murders. You know, he was never the hero in that book, and that's why we had second book, Children of Dune. Religion makes demands that can't be denied unless you're willing to pay a terrible price, Flattery said. Religion's just a fact like any other, Prue countered. We investigate primitive religions. Why can't we investigate our own? Didn't God make us curious? Aren't we as scientists supposed to put ourselves beyond the reach of prejudice? Only a fool imagines he's beyond the reach of his prejudices. Well, I prefer to be a Calvinist. I'm willing to be damned for the greater glory of God. You mustn't say such things, he snapped. He put a hand to his head, thinking, I mustn't let her goad me this way. You can't show me anything I mustn't say, she said. You can't claim scientists can equate God with ideas of mathematical infinity. We manipulate mathematical infinity. Why can't we manipulate God? What silly pretensions, he said. Mathematical infinity? Zero over zero, eh? Or infinity minus infinity? Or infinity times zero? God times zero, she said. Why not? You're the mathematician, he said, his voice pouncing. You know better than anyone else these are indeterminate forms. You know better than anyone else that these are indeterminate forms. Mathematical nonsense. God minus infinity. Mathematical nonsense. He glared at her. His throat felt dry and burning. She tricked him into this corner. It was blasphemy, and he was more vulnerable than she was. Guiltier. You're supposed to be doing this You're supposed to be doing this to me, aren't you? He accused. You're supposed to push me and test me. Give me no peace. I know. How little he knows, or even suspects, she thought. Infinity doesn't follow the conditions of number or quantity. If there's a God, I don't see why he should follow these conditions either. As for testing you, horseradish, all you need is an occasional kick in the philosophy. Stick to my preaching and let you play with my math. Is that it? There's no blasphemy in developing a new kind of calculus or any other new tool to deal with our universe, she said. Our universe? Flattery asked. As much of it as we can take, she said. That's the whole idea of a colony ship, isn't it? Is it? He asked. She adjusted the coarse constant repeater, said, I'll stick to math. How about a calculus that goes beyond the limits of x over y as they tend toward infinity? That should be possible. Creating a new kind of calculus and building this living, sentient creature aren't the same, he said. Without the calculus, we may never achieve the creature. She keeps trying to corner me, he thought. Why? The issue is whether we're intruding on God's domain of creation. You holy Joes are all alike. You want to glorify God, but you'd limit the means. Flattery stared at the curved gray metal of the bulkhead above him, seeing the tiny imperfections in the crackled pattern of its finish. He felt he was being maneuvered. She was stalking him the way a man might stalk game. Was it his soul she was after? He sensed he was in profound danger, that the idea of consciousness as something they could create might inflict itself on his soul as an incurable wound. He put a hand to his mouth. I cannot permit her to bait me and tempt me. Raj, she whispered, and there was terror in her voice. He whirled toward her, seeing the streaks of light across the big board like red knife slashes. We're almost at redline temperatures in Sector C8 of the hype tanks, she said. Everything I do seems to make the systems oscillate. Flattery's hands flashed out to the life systems repeater switches, brought his own monitors alive. He scanned the instruments, commanded, called him. Nothing I do seems to work, she panted. He glanced at her, saw she was fighting the board, not working with it. Call Tim, he said. She hit the command circuit switch with the heel of her left hand, shouted, Tim to Comm Central, emergency! Again, Flattery scanned his instruments. There appeared to be 3 points of temperature shift outside the hype tanks, with corresponding variation inside. As Prue tried to compensate for one fluctuation, the others fell farther toward the red. He had to force himself to keep his hands off the controls. If tank temperature went into the red without dehype precautions, there'd be death among the helpless occupants. Despite Prue's desperate efforts, death was approaching 3 sectors of the C8 tank. Some 400 human lives in there. The hatch from the computer shop banged open. Timberlake leaped through with Bickle right behind. Hype tanks, Prudence gasped. Temperature. Timberlake threw himself across the comm central into his action couch. His vac suit rasped against the cocoon lips as he turned, grasped the traveler controls. Give me the red switch, he snapped. To hell with the count, I'm taking it. And he took it, and the big board swinging across much too fast. C8, she said, sinking back and wiping perspiration from her forehead. I've got it, he said. He scanned the dials and gauges, his fingers playing over the console. Bickle slipped into his own couch, tripped his repeaters. It's in the hull shielding, he said. First 2 layers, Timberlake said. Prudence put a hand to her throat, tried not to look at Bickle. He mustn't suspect our attentions on him, she thought. Then, wouldn't it be monstrous irony to lose our colonists and burden ourselves with guilt before the need for it? That's doing it, Bickle said. He looked across the board above Timberlake, saw the warning telltales winking out, the dials swinging back into normal range. Faulty feedback for a patch of our shell reflectors. Focused on C8, Timberlake said. The system started to oscillate, and that through the overload switches left us wide open. Another design flaw, Pickle sneered. And such a simple pattern, Pickle thought. The whole curve acted like a lens to focus energy within the ship, unless reflector and shell shielding systems compensated. Prudence traced the line of the remaining telltales. C8's on a line with that robot store section you raided. Is that all it takes to throw the ship off balance? Gives you a wonderful feeling of confidence in the 10 eggs design, doesn't it? Pickle said. They didn't warn me, she thought. They cheated. Calculated emergencies, they said. Just enough to keep a fine edge on your reaction abilities. Reaction abilities. You overcompensated, Prue, Timberlake said. Make minimal adjustments to avoid oscillations while you hunt for the source of your trouble. You had sensor telltales flaring left. You had sensor telltales flaring right out through the ship to pinpoint where you needed shielding reinforcement. I panicked, she thought. I guess I let myself get too tired. Even as she spoke, she sensed how lame the excuse sounded. I was too intent doing the job on Flattery, she thought. I had him headed for a nice corner where he'd have to fight his way out, and I missed the ship trouble until it was almost ready to wreck us. It occurred to her then to wonder if one of the crew had her as a special project, to keep her abilities toned up, on edge. Prue, you've got to remember that when the overload switches go, the computer automatics are out of the circuit, Pickle said. This thing was designed to be brought back into line by a conscious intelligence. One of us, or an OMC. Oh, shut up, she flared. I made a mistake, I know it. I won't do it again. No damage was done, Timberlake said. I don't need you to defend me, she snapped. And she thought, no damage. Nothing was harmed except one of the crew. Me. She pressed her hands together, still they're trembling. We're sitting ducks for any real emergency. We can't turn back without the risk of a runaway dive into Seoul or becoming another of her wandering comets. We can't go on unless we solve the unsolvable. Getting to her. It's really getting to her. Take it easy, Prue. Take it easy, Prue. Flattery soothed. We probably put you on the big board too soon after getting you out of hype. Thanks for the excuse, she thought. Flattery glanced around the room, seeing the poised silence of Bickle and Timberlake, both of them scorched by Prue's anger. Bickle slid out of his couch, secured a set of test leads in the clip at his left shoulder. A multimeter could be seen protruding from his breast pocket. Timberlake was refining the hull temperature adjustments, putting the system back into the computer circuits. Flattery returned his attention to Prudence. She shouldn't have panicked, he thought. Not the type. She has a woman's wide perspective and a confidence in her intuition. She should be better at the big board than she should be better at the big board than any of us. She under greater strain? Does she know something I don't? And her question is, who's the one that's putting pressure on her from the crew? Is it Bickle? Is it just Bickle's natural, Bickleness? Or is it just the whole situation? Is she just being put into stress by the situation itself? Is that what the UMC had planned? Next time, we'll begin with Chapter 13. We understand synergy to mean the fortuitous working together of a set of components which have assembled in our attempts to achieve artificial consciousness. Working together, the components produce more than the product of their sum. Prudence Lon Weyand, incomplete segment from message capsule. This is the number 3. Prudence Lon Weyand at the number third. Number third. That's from. So I guess all the other ships did blow up, and this maybe uh I suppose if we're joining this crew, this might be the actual successful attempt, right? And then what happens next? Who knows? Find out next time on Dragon Ball Z. Bow, 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 bow. All right, everybody, take care. Be well. I will definitely be finishing up this book soon. If not tomorrow, then I'll go read the rest of it on Tuesday. We'll see though. We shall see. We might just do this in parts. We might do some gaming on Tuesday. I don't know. We might do gaming tomorrow and then do the book on Tuesday. Plenty of options. Everybody take care. Be well. I have to go pee because I've been drinking so much tea and water. So yeah, make sure you are staying hydrated, drinking plenty of water, washing your damn hands, read a good book, play a game to entertain yourself. Go and spend time with your loved ones. Go and spend some time by yourself. That's fun too. Go for a walk in nature. Go for a walk in the city. Who knows what you'll find? But make sure you're taking care of yourselves, drinking plenty of water, having some good foods, washing your damn hands. We'll repeat it. We'll repeat it as many times as necessary for you to go and do it. Now, go wash them. And tune in next time for the rest of the book. For some more gaming, maybe some Helldivers with Japan Spits. No, Hollow Knight too. Yeah, that's also on the list. Something soon. Bye. Dum 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 da da dum 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 da da dum dum da 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 dum da da dum dum da dum dee 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 dee. Dum da dum 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 da da dum dum da 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 dum da dum dee dee dee. Meow 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 meow.